I'll have it advanced. And you're on.
Okay, good afternoon. The Design Review Board 1 public meeting of July 24th, 2008 will call to order. Thank you. Please refrain from talking amongst yourselves during the meeting, and please turn off or put on vibrate all cell phones and pagers. If you need to talk, please leave the meeting room. Anyone who wishes to speak, including applicants, is asked to completely fill out one of the speaker cards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff. You will be called to present a case or speak on a specific item as desired. Anyone who wishes to be re-noticed about a project must completely fill out one of the postcards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff to receive notice of subsequent meetings. Current Design Review Board agendas are available by calling our Design Review Board hotline at 818-548-3171 or by visiting our website at www.ci.glendale.ca.us. A handout describing the procedures of the meeting, possible board decisions, and Design Review Board reconsideration and appeals is available at the table by the front door. Please note that appeals must be filed within either 7 or 15 calendar days of the Design Review Board decision date, depending on the application. The case planner will announce the length of the appeal period with each case. Right. In terms of a roll call, Board Member Aliano is absent. Board Member Ellis?
Present.
Board Member Insua?
Here.
Board Member Simonian?
Here.
Board Member Yoon?
Here.
Report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before 5 p.m. on July 17th, 2008. There are no staff announcements. However, we do have one regarding today's agenda. The third item on today's agenda, which would be number 1-PDR-2007-059B. This is for Highland, 1343 Highland Avenue, the applicant being Nick and Ava Storcer. There has been a request made to continue that item for 2 weeks. So again, at the board's discretion, the board would have to then go ahead and make a motion to continue the matter for 2 weeks, and this would be to the August 7th hearing date.
Someone want to entertain a motion?
I'll move the postponement or the
Continuation.
It'd be the
Thank you.
continuation.
That was the term I was looking for.
Second?
I have a motion by Board Member Ellis and a second by Board Member Insua. Board Member Ellis?
Yes.
Board Member Yu?
Yes.
Board Member Insua?
Yes.
Chairman Simonian?
Yes.
The motion passes to continue 4-0. And there is also another request to take an item out of order, and this would be regarding the minutes of July the 26th. So I believe the board had requested additional information before you would approve the minutes of July the 26th, and Chris Baxter is here to present that information to you.
Thank you very much. I think the best way to start the subject, if staff could just give us a brief overview of the question at hand, and then we'll bring Mr. Ellis up to speed because I think he wasn't here last time, and we're waiting for another person to come in to answer some of these questions.
Hey, then, Mr. Insua. All right, well, we'll go proceed. Mr. Chair, members of the board,
Last week? Yeah. No.
on June 26th of this year, the project at 2061 Montecito Drive, case number 1-PDR-2008-009-A, was approved with conditions, and condition number 7 says, the window schedule and elevation shall clearly identify the window material to be aluminum-clad wood. Now, during the meeting, the applicant passed around a material sample, a large material sample. And so, at the time the board members passed it around, there was no obvious comments for or against it. And the applicant, 1 week later, when he received the board decision, called me on July 7th, and we talked, and he said, what I showed the board was the vinyl cladding over solid wood window structures versus the aluminum clad, which was the condition. He says, I remember the board members not having an objection to that. And I'll be glad to take this up to you and pass it around here. So at the last meeting, when you were reviewing the minutes of the case afterward, I believe there was only 3 of you present, and there was 5 at the meeting. So I talked to the applicant afterward and said, we didn't really come to a decision. He said, what if I bring this material board sample in? And I said, fine. And so that's what he's done. Normally, we keep something like this on a smaller scale, but he only had this thing. So this is material board, if I may approach the chair. Of
course.
Sir. And then here's anyone's interested, this is the Anderson window, some more details if you want to look at any of that. You guys can look at, but that's what he passed around.
Mr. Baxter, has anybody reviewed the tape to see if there was not, in fact, a comment made? Because I think a comment was made. I tend to remember. I tend to...
Discussions were made.
But, yeah, vinyl windows have never been high on my list of items.
You know something? You are correct. But there was no direct comments, but there was nothing that was negative. Actually,
Okay.
what I remember hearing, and I tried to write this stuff down. Shame on me. Just look here real quick. What I remember pretty clearly was that the board members said that there were high-quality materials for this project. That was one of the things that the board members affirmed. Now, there was all kinds of problems with the ins and outs of the building, and that you all worked through that, and the roof orientation and things like that, but that's not the issue. The issue was the high-quality materials, and that was, at that time, that was what the board members stated. And I remember at least 2 of the board members stated that, and I believe it may have been Mr. and Mrs. Simonian, and...
Wasn't a direct comment.
Yeah, there wasn't a direct comment, but there was just a kind of affirmative about the high-quality materials.
What do you need from us today to affirm what the staff has put in the minutes?
Well, you just would confirm it and vote to approve with the aluminum, if that's what you want to go with.
Gotcha.
Very quickly, Mr. Baxter, during the hearing, I believe we asked the applicant what the existing windows were,
Yes, sir.
and what was the answer to that question?
The same, he said he was matching existing as well.
It's matching existing.
That's correct.
And so the window that was passed around, or the sample that was passed around during the hearing, was stated to match the existing windows
Yes.
of the building. We had a discussion about this, I believe, last time around, and we just weren't sure what the overall consensus was on the matter. As far as I'm concerned, it's matching the existing windows of the house. It is a vinyl window, however, it's wood clad with vinyl, and it seems to be of good quality because of this, sample, as we could tell.
I have a
And
question
so,
when you're...
as far as I'm concerned, I don't think it's necessary for us to prescribe an aluminum window. So I would be okay with a wood-clad aluminum window. I mean, a vinyl window that's clad over wood. Mr.
Do we know for a fact, have we checked if the existing windows at the existing home are of this type?
No, sir. I did not go out and look at the windows in that type of detail. That was his statement.
One other thing I just want to add is the addition, from what I remember, was pretty extensive, and it was adding a lot of square footage to the house. And so it's not a slam dunk to just say, it's okay to match the existing, because it is a large portion of it that's being added. So I think if we feel like we should go with the aluminum or fiberglass or whatever clad, I think it's okay if it would be consistent with what we've been doing with the other houses.
I'll do what it takes.
In that sense. And I'm assuming they're going with the vinyl clad wood to get the smaller profile than what the straight vinyl would be able to achieve, I guess. So I don't know if it would, if the existing ones are just vinyl, not with the wood inside of it, I'm sure the profile will be a lot thicker than what it is there.
And so if we went with aluminum, what would occur with the existing windows? I would either have to change the existing windows to match it, or they wouldn't match one another, and there might be situations where the new is next to the existing. And there might be situations where, in order to rip out the existing, he's got to basically go through and touch the waterproofing of the building. So in these kind of situations, if it's a good quality window, I tend to be okay with matching the existing. But I certainly could hear arguments on the other side as well, maybe persuaded otherwise. Mr. Baxter?
Mr. Chair, I know that so that this discussion will be shortened, I'll be glad to go out and check the other windows on the site. I'm sure the owner would be glad to take me through and show me what the existing are. I can look at it, take maybe a photograph or so of it, then I can come back and I can either confirm that what the architect said was accurate or not,
That's a great idea.
and try to give you some better information if you would like to do that.
I think that's a great idea. In such a case, we would just continue the approval of these minutes
Right.
until 2 weeks from today.
All right, sir.
In which
That's what
case,
we'll
staff
do.
would have had an opportunity to go and take a look at it.
Thank you, sir.
Can you make sure you measure the profile?
The profile?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, I will measure the profile of the window.
It'd also be interesting how many are actually going to be left behind. You know, how many are...
Replacing all
how
of
many-
them?
Yeah, right. If there's 2 of them left, and as you said, Mr. Yu, it's a pretty major addition.
That is a good point, sir. Very good.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and just continue the meeting minutes up from July the 26th to the August 7th Sun Review Board date.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes all of staff's changes and announcements. On to the regular agenda.
Well, welcome to Design Review Board 1. We have a short schedule for this evening. We had 3 projects to review, but now we only have 2 because one of them got continued, as staff indicated. And so our first case is 1-PDR-2008-042-A, 1300 Flower Street. Does staff want to introduce us to the project?
It'd be my pleasure. Chair, members of the board, Walt Disney Company is proposing to build a 23,426 single-story series of buildings that would serve as a daycare facility for their employees. It will be private. Will not be open to the public. The site is bounded by Flower, Paula Davis, and Truett. The site is in 2 different zones currently. It's in the IND zone on this portion closest to Flower, and then there's a 65-foot section along the Truett side that is in the R12P zone. This would normally mean that the relevant zoning requirements of those zones would apply. However, because the project is in the Disney GC3 campus, there's a specific development agreement and scope of development that specifies essentially all the development standards for the site. So the underlying zoning generally does not apply. The project zoning is indicated here in the vicinity map, and then you can see that the applicant has given us a variety of renderings. They've also got some more that they're going to be presenting later. The buildings range in size from about 4,000 to about 6,000 square feet, and one notable aspect of the project is that Disney is hoping for LEED Gold certification, which essentially means that they're designing the project to use very little water, use very little electricity, have very little impact on the environment in general. Some of the key features of that, they're going to be capturing stormwater and storing it on site in a cistern and reusing it for landscaping. They've got a photovoltaic array on various portions of the building roofs to generate on-site electricity. Some of the roof are actually going to be green roof with planted with grass to reduce the amount of air conditioning necessary to cool the building. The buildings have been designed with a ventilation scheme so that it again reduces the air conditioning requirements. And there's some unique materials being used to manufacture the building and the perimeter walls. Notably, they've got a sample here of the rammed earth material that they're going to use for some of the building walls, and they can describe that in more detail later. The project, as I said, is in the GC3 area, and the general terms of the project are that it provides for up to another 3.5 million square feet of new development capacity in the GC3 project area, which is far beyond just this one block. And a portion of the project has already been developed to the north and to the east of the current site. because the project is covered by the EIR for the GC3 project, and that EIR was certified in 2000, not like it says in my staff report 2003, but that was a typo. It was certified in 2000. Staff has determined that the provisions of the EIR are still applicable and no new environmental review is necessary for this project. However, the project, as a term of the environmental review impact report for the GC3 project, will have to do a site-specific soils and technical analysis to address potential seismic and other soil stability issues. And that'll be done at the time that they submit the project for building permits. The Flower Street is eventually going to be widened as part of the GC3 development project, but not at this time. So there'll be some interim landscaping installed along the Flower Street side that will not reflect the final landscaping scheme once the street is widened. No improvements are proposed on the Paula side. Disney owns the facilities across the street, and when those sites are to be developed, then that street will be improved. Truett is mostly residential, is all residential on the site fronting the project. There is some dialogue in the scope of development that indicates that there should be some new trees and some landscaping along that frontage. There is landscaping proposed for the site over here in the landscaping scheme. Some additional landscaping beyond what's out there right now. However, considering the fact that most of the trees out there on Truett are already mature, it seemed to make sense to staff and the applicant not to remove them merely for the sake of complying with the scope of development, but rather to retain those mature trees. And staff has recommended that any gaps in the trees, and it looks like there might be 2 locations where we would consider them to be gaps in the trees, will be replanted with matching trees. That's one of our proposed conditions. The wall along Truett, which can be seen in this rendering somewhat, is a straight, continuous, 6-foot-high wall made out of the sort of composition wood and other material, and it presents rather as we described it, a monolithic appearance towards Truett. We worked with the applicant. We suggested to the applicant that maybe there might be some alternatives to reduce that, to provide a little bit of more visual appeal. However, the final design does not incorporate those suggestions, and the applicant is prepared to provide some more insight into that. In general, though, we're happy with the landscape design and the public streetscape improvements in general. We think the palette is a nice palette. Most of it's low water using and California native, and provides a varied and attractive plant palette. The site planning is sort of necessarily inward focused because of the nature of the facility. The buildings surround 2 interior courtyards to provide some security to the children and provide those play areas. The courtyards are represented up here in a little more detail, and if you look at it carefully, you can see that it's been very intensively designed to provide a very active sort of learning and play environment for the children. The parking is, there are 53 parking spaces entered from the Paula side, and then there's a one-way driveway and exited on the Davis side. It's a little bit short of what the zoning ordinance provides for, which would require 70 spaces. However, because there's a surplus of parking in the GC3 project area, Disney's giving credit for that, and this is considered to be in compliance with the parking standards for the project, the GC3 project. The rammed earth I mentioned earlier will be used on a portion of the building, I think along the flower side. Question had come up, will it be protected from rain and whatnot? And it's my understanding from learning about the rammed earth online, and I think Disney can respond further, that yes, there's a way for it to be both seismically stable and to be protected from the elements. Because the existing buildings on the site are all single-story, sort of warehouse and low-scale office, R&D types of buildings like you see in the rest of the campus, They're all going to be demolished and replaced with this building. Because this building is essentially single-story in character, we do think it provides essential compatibility to the neighborhood in terms of mass and scale. The top of the roof of the building, of the tallest portion of the administrative building, is 23 feet 9 inches. But again, it's not a two-story building per se. There's no function at that elevation. It's just part of this design scheme, in part to provide the ventilation, I think, through the building that they're seeking. The other buildings on the site vary from 15 feet 7 inches to 22 feet 9 inches in height. The setbacks on the property conform to the scope of development, but they vary from 0 in certain locations where the buildings come right out to the property line to much greater than that, and overall it does achieve the 10-foot average setback that is required in the scope of development. The quality of materials in general throughout the project appears quite high. It presents, we think, an elegant appearance to the project area, to the streets. We think it is consistent with the scope and the development agreement. The integration of the green building techniques into the design seems very coherent and appropriate, doesn't stand out, and it's commendable that they're trying to achieve such a high standard. The only two conditions that staff has is that existing street trees along the public right-of-way shall be shown on the plans submitted for plan check, and any gaps in the trees be filled with matching trees. The trees along Truett would be filled at the owner's request of the neighboring residential property owners, not sort of at Disney Swim, but at the request of those property owners if they want the tree. And then again, we'd bring to your attention that staff and Disney did not come to agreement on the ultimate design of the wall along Truett. The one other thing I wanted to point out, there are no signs proposed for the project other than this address sign that would be near, even though it says Flower Street, it'll be near the Paula entrance. It's a low ground sign, so there'll be nothing to advertise the nature of the facility other than that address sign. The project will be processed under the old design review rules, and that's due to the nature of the development agreement provisions, which means there'll be a 7-day appeal period for any decision that you make today on the project. In addition to planning department staff, there are staff here from development services and the city attorney's office who can answer questions. And that would conclude my presentation. Do you have any questions for me or other staff?
Do we have any questions for Mr. Hamilton? No. Okay. I actually have a question. And what has staff recommended for that fence along the street there? We understand that there's not much room to play with the current building design and the parking lot layout, but we were hoping that maybe they could do some insets or alcoves similar to what they had achieved along Flower Street, just to give the wall maybe a little more visual interest. We were also hoping that maybe in a couple of areas, maybe here and here, they could have notched the wall and used it as an opportunity for putting in a greater variety of landscaping, or maybe another couple of trees, something just to reduce the monolithic nature of this. Stephanie Reich and I have worked with the applicant about this, and if you have other more design-related questions, I'd refer to her to respond to that. And it seems as though the applicant has brought in some actual materials and samples.
It appears so, and I'm sure they'll be showing them to you.
Very good, because it's hard for us to see from here, but...
Would you like me to...
No, I think as the applicant comes up, we'll have them present it. So do we have any more questions for Mr. Hamilton? No. Thank you. Well, we have quite a bit of speaker cards for this project, and so let us begin with Adam Gilbert, who is the applicant, architect, and also the landscape architect.
Wow, that's a lot of hats.
I wish. Probably get paid more. I'm Adam Gilbert, Director of Corporate Real Estate for the Walt Disney Company, and
Very
I'm
good.
the architect.
If you would pull the microphone down, that way we'll get to
There we
record
go.
everything.
We have some boards, as you've seen right here. I don't know if you'd like us to spend maybe a couple minutes right now and put them up behind you so both members of the board as well as members in the audience can see it, as opposed to they don't see the backs of the boards.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so can we give it 2 minutes here and put those up? Is that okay?
Of course.
Great, thank you.
There's been a request from the applicant due to the scope of the project, if the applicant would be able to have greater than 5 minutes. And typically, an applicant is allowed 5 minutes to speak and make their presentation.
I think
So
that's appropriate.
it's up to the chairman and to
Sure.
the board whether or not you wish to.
Please go ahead. I think that would be appropriate
Grant
to
additional
perhaps
time.
grant him some additional time and then maybe some additional rebuttal time as well. It seems as though there's quite a bit of speakers. And we are going to try to limit the speakers to 3 minutes per person.
That would be,
And there's quite a bit of speaker cards here, so we're going to try to enforce the 3 minutes as well as we could. And perhaps we could provide the architect/applicant with 10 minutes to start, and then another 10 minutes of, 7 or 8 minutes of rebuttal. Let's go with 8 minutes of rebuttal, if that's okay with the board.
It's okay. That's fine.
Okay?
okay.
Yeah, I must. I know, folks.
That's what I was.
Yeah, I think it's in the, I had a copy, it was on my desk.
Alameda?
Oh, no, get that one.
On Alameda?
No, not the Alameda.
Wait, I think we did.
No, I thought one of it was in here was, I thought,
The letter from the Northwest Glendale homeowners.
this one is on Highland.
Oh, it's the other one, huh?
So I'll make copies.
That's fine.
It's going to be a Rubicon, I can tell.
You want me to get some of our more substantial pieces?
Let's just get some audience participation, just have them stand.
Might as well, huh?
Remind me not to buy those.
Yeah, those little, they're really, they're great lying, but they're, yeah.
Oh, I see, there's some thicker ones and thinner ones, huh?
Yeah, it's just lightweight. Yeah, I take that one back.
It seems as though your system is not working. And you could have maybe one of your staff members at the side there and
Have
could
the
switch
heavy-duty
them.
easels.
Yeah, here we go. I'm dealing with the city here. I got hardware.
Pre-World War II style.
Yeah, that's right.
easels.
They're made out of steel. Did you rehearse this?
Yeah, there were 3 of them.
Just the 3 of them? We don't need this one.
If you would state your name for the record one more time, and
No worries.
and we'll start your time as soon as Vilya comes back.
No worries.
We got it.
Okay.
We're okay. We got it.
Got it?
Yeah.
Very good. Can't forget.
No, sir.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi, my name is Adam Gilbert. I'm a Director of Corporate Real Estate for the Walt Disney Company at Disney Core Services in Burbank, California. Chairman Simone and members of the board, Disney's really actually thrilled to be here today to discuss the design of our child care center, to discuss our next steps in a long range. This is our next step in our long-range transformation of the GC3 site, and obviously a much-needed amenity for our employees. I don't want to get into too much detail. Staff talked a lot about the location of the site, but I want to give you guys a little bit of context about the project before introducing the architect and the landscape architect. Alas, I only wear one hat, not three, so I apologize for filling out the form incorrectly. We do have a brief presentation to assist the members of the board on this process, and we have detailed plans and elevations in front of you. We actually have additional renderings with some more before and after pictures to give you guys a better understanding of the setback in the landscape area for the child care center. And I also want to give you guys, give the members of the board the context of how we made these decisions in terms of the siting and the location. We have Leo Marmol from Marmol Redziner and Associates, as well as Susan Goldsman for Moore, Isofano and Goldsman, the landscape architect with us today. And before I pass the baton on to these talented design professionals, I wanted to go take a step back and talk about the existing site. From the plans that are in front of you, the two that I want to speak to, one is in the top left corner behind the board, which gives members a sense of the industrial nature of the project site. The GC3 site is part of a real project area. We did go through a lengthy entitlement process in 2000, as staff mentioned, and this is one site that we do own that has, as staff mentioned, 40-some-odd thousand square feet of existing buildings. Currently, there are about 50 employees in those buildings. Before we emptied one of them, there were 120. We emptied the building in anticipation of this project. As you know, the GC3 project went through a very thorough and public review, a very analyzed and very complete EIR with strict and clear mitigation measures designed to address impacts. The development agreement also included a scope of development, as staff had mentioned, outlining how the design of the public realm and setbacks would be handled, as well as landscape, height, massing, and articulation. And as staff had mentioned, this project here is completely compliant with that scope of development. In addition, as I mentioned, staff mentioned earlier, we've already commenced with our first phase of this project, which was an office campus further down on Flower. About the site itself, in terms of why it's suitable for this use, if you look at the second board, which is behind member you here, it has basically, we've shown the zones which are in our development agreement in terms of how high we could go. And this project area is limited because it is adjacent to a residential neighborhood. So the height limit, as was identified in and agreed upon in the development agreement, was 45 feet. In addition, maintaining the 65-foot setback for open space and parking, which is consistent with what's there right now. We've chosen actually to build substantially lower than what's entitled. In lieu of putting a 3-story, 100,000 square foot office building, we've proposed a 23,000 square foot child care center with significantly less staff than what's entitled. In addition, issues is that this site is adjacent to but outside our core campus, so it allows for non-employee parents to pick up and drop off, and allows them to not go onto the main part of the campus, but it'll still be secure, but without having them to go onto the main campus. One of the issues is access and traffic circulation. As staff had identified, access is going to be off of Paula, so cars would drive on Flower, go onto Paula, and turn right into the project site, which will be a one-way parking and driveway area, and then they'll exit at Davis, and again have a right turn only to get back to Flower. Speaking of traffic, as I do want to mention, we did reach out to the members of the community in that we'll call it the trapezoid neighborhood, bounded by Hazel and Paula, Cosmic, Davis, Truett, Aristo, Blossom. I think I hit them all. We reached out to them and did meet with them with an open house last week, and traffic and parking are some of the key issues, and we do not want our employees driving in that neighborhood. We have adequate parking in our broader GC3 project area, as staff had mentioned. Those staff who can't park in that on-site will be directed to park literally right across the street on Flower, on our campus. And we're more than committed to working with our neighbors, and have been since Disney's been moved to GCBC over 50 years ago. I did mention Leo and Susan earlier, and I want to tell you how Disney reached out to these two firms. When interviewing architects, we wanted firms and staff who understood Southern California, understood our climate, our region, the design, had experience in child care centers, and because these are very unique facilities. They understood massing and the residential scale, not only from our neighborhood, but also in terms of what's appropriate for child care. We wanted somebody who's creative and innovative when it comes, obviously, to child play space. This is not what we call a baby warehouse. This is going to be a very interesting environment for the kids. I want it to be stimulating. I also want to be considerate to the environment and green design. Staff had mentioned we're going for LEED Gold certification, and this is a big goal for us, and we're thrilled to try and do something that's green and sort of an environment that is educational in nature. We're pleased to hire two firms who obviously meet those objectives. Both are California-based firms. MRA. Marmol Radzner Associates is a leader in high-end residential and commercial design. They've done work for us before, and we've been thrilled with their product. And MIG is a leader in landscape design and children play space, and actually have done work in the city of Glendale before. I want to thank you for allowing me a couple minutes of my time. I'm going to now hand it off to Leo Marmol from Marmol Radzner, who will talk about design. And then Susan Goldsman from MIG will talk about the landscape and play area. And if we have any questions, we can go now, or we can go at the end.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? One question I have. You mentioned that employees will be parking across the street across Flower in a parking structure across the street, and then we'll walk over.
In the parking lot across the street, correct.
And do you anticipate a majority of the users to actually park across the street and walk over, or do you anticipate them dropping off the child and then going and parking?
That's a good question. For our employees, some will probably drop off at site. The majority will drop off at site, especially with younger kids who are in little buckets, under one. Some employees who work in some of the buildings nearby, as mentioned, Disney occupies the vast majority of the GC3 project area. And some employees will probably just park in their site, and if their children are old enough, probably they will walk them, if it's within 500 or 600 feet, probably will walk them to the site without ever going to the location.
Very good. And is there going to be non-Disney employee users of the site? Besides the staff, is there going to be people that are actually dropping off their children that are not Disney employees?
If they are parents of the children, yes, but the children will all be, one of the parents at least will be a Disney employee.
I see. One of the two parents.
Yes.
Makes sense. Okay. Do we have any more questions?
I got one quick follow-up to that. What's currently happening with your staff for daycare on the site?
In Glendale, they are longingly waiting on our wait list for our center in Burbank, which will remain open. And even when the center opens, there will still be a wait list, alas.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Our next speaker is the architect, Leo Marmol, FAIA.
Thank you. Leo Marmol with Marmol Radzner and Associates. And we too are very happy to be here with you to talk about the work we've been doing with Disney. Although I did make a mistake and share with my daughter that I don't actually get to work with Nemo, and so we're working through that disappointment right now. But we are very thrilled to participate with the goals that Disney outlined for us. So to begin, just in terms of how we think about this site, 3 of the edges are currently bounded by the existing Disney campus. The edge we're most concerned about is the southern edge, the Truett edge, that is up against the single-story residential neighborhood. So for us, that was always a primary concern. The circulation pattern that Adam mentioned a moment ago is very simple and intuitive. You come off of Flower, you drive south, you go in at the eastern edge, there's a one-way driveway, we then exit and return to Flower. So it's a very simple, logical way in which traffic moves around this site. The massing of the building, in terms of thinking about the buildings themselves, also took a very logical, simple approach. The massing moved up against the commercial artery or the main Flower access street, and so we pushed the buildings up against that. We pushed them as far as possible away from the single-story residential neighborhood, and we are using the... Do I have to stop?
Unfortunately, we allocated 10 minutes overall to the applicant. However, Mr. Marmol has a separate sign-in sheet, so it's a separate speaker card. So I believe he could get 3 minutes, and so I'm not sure how much of it he's already used. So could
Gee, would you like to start from the 3-minute mark again?
Let's start with the 3-minute mark, and then the rest of the applicants that are part of your project or your staff would be limited to 3 minutes each.
Okay.
Proceed.
Okay, thank you. So we've massed the buildings up against Flower and used our parking area as a separation buffer to the residential neighborhood. The buildings themselves form two very simple L's. The center spine of that L, kind of down the middle of the campus, is the office support space. And what that does is it breaks our play areas down into two smaller areas. We're working closely with a child care consultant, and her big advice is always to break spaces down into smaller play areas and learning spaces. So at every opportunity, we are doing that. The issue of security and noise is also addressed in the same way. That is, the buildings themselves act as our buffer, and separation helps us kind of move away from the residential community. The building itself breaks down into 3 pieces. The lower left piece is the younger kids. That you enter down that ceremonial spine with the pitched roof that opens up. The younger kids go into the first building, the infant. The toddlers are up in the upper left-hand side, so that play area to the left there is separated for the very young kids. To the right, then, on the diagram would be the pre-K kids and their pre-K play area. The issue of sustainability is very real for us. We believe in these principles greatly. We're doing a number of things to mitigate our use of resource, and really we're trying to manage 3 primary resources: energy, water, and then the materials themselves to construct the building. Energy, the big goal is, of course, to reduce consumption. We're doing that with natural daylighting, natural ventilation, thermal mass, green roofs, photovoltaic systems, a lot of systems integrated into the building, but also a very passive approach to it. You can see on the far right diagram, my right, you can see how the building form itself starts to use the natural resources on the site, bringing in daylight when we want it, blocking it when we don't, and using natural ventilation to cool and comfort the building. Water management, as it was mentioned earlier, we are storing our stormwater on site, and we will use that for irrigation. We will treat it when necessary, for example, off the parking surface. We're using green roofs that will also capture much of our rainwater, and we're using native plants, which Mig will talk more about. And then our materials, generally recycled or renewable at every opportunity, locally sourced where possible. The exterior palette is very simple and natural in terms of the rammed earth and wood resources. I will make one quick comment on the wall that was mentioned earlier. The only reason that we left the wall as one single strand is simply because the wall is secondary. The wall is simply support. It's really what the community perception is a landscape wall. I'll let Mig talk more about that, but the reason we just kept the wall simple is because the goal is not to ever see the wall. Your perception of that will be simply of landscape.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the architect? No, I got
I got a couple. Is there any air conditioning involved in the building?
Yes. We will have heating and cooling support for the building. The goal will be to minimize the usage of it, but it's interesting. You don't actually get lead points to eliminate heating and cooling. We did that once, and we didn't get
I got an office in Burbank in July and August. Even though the air blows through it, you need something, especially with kids.
We do have support.
Tell me real quick, I'm not the architect on the board, the Ram Earth, what walls, what part of the structure is that?
Sure. It's the wall that actually surrounds the site on three edges. I think you can see
The landscape, the perimeter wall?
Correct.
Not the building, okay.
Correct.
And does it have rebar or any reinforcement in it?
It is. It has reinforcement, and it's a reinforcement earth. It actually has some cement mixed with the dirt.
Yeah, because that kind of looks like cement that you got there, and
It's actually dirt.
Okay.
Thanks again. A couple questions that have to do with design, because that's obviously we're here. The hours of operation, what will the hours of operation be?
Generally, it's 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but that's something that Disney will look at from an operational perspective.
Okay.
But our understanding is...
But it can go further. If it could go beyond, it's at 9 o'clock, whatever.
I would defer that question to the operations side. That is not our understanding.
Okay. And this is all concerning design. Do you know, maybe I'll ask the Disney group, concerning drop-off? Will the drop-off occur in major groups? For example, most activity at, let's say, 7 o'clock in the morning, and then most activity between the hours of 5 and 6:30 in the evening, given that that's probably more typical workout, and the gentleman is saying he can answer it. The reason I mention it is utilize the parking as a buffer. And I think that's a good idea if the traffic patterns and the flow and the activity is not very high. Because if it is high, then that parking really is a distraction. It's the noise. No matter how quiet a car is, there's still activities, doors closing, radios, and all that other stuff. So my thinking, and again, activity as it's focused with design only in that parking, did you have any thoughts about, okay, we're on a commercial street, which is Flower. It already has pockets of parking that come up to the edge and other buildings. Did you explore the possibility of having the building be the buffer, since it is a low, squat building and a single-story residential design, have that back, which is kind of fun and playful, have that with a landscape buffer, have its face towards the residents, and then have the parking be more on Flower, do whatever you want there. Two things are potential there. One, you minimize the traffic coming in to the Paula and the Davis side, even though it is one-directional. The activity's there. It's active. That's where you're facing the active. And so with respect to design, the parking, I can see it as a buffer, but I can also see it as a big nuisance if the activity is not residential friendly. And that was really my thought, I guess. So anyway, did you have any thoughts about that?
Well, the parking, our thinking on that was that the parking is certainly screened. There's not visual access to the parking.
But there's other types of noise and car doors and mufflers and radios and stuff of that stuff. Any thoughts on that as it affects design?
I think for us, it felt like a very logical flow in terms of the parking flow. I think that the distance does in fact mitigate that. There's a wall between the neighborhood and the parking. The drop-off distraction stretches out for a few hours, but it's a limited time frame where the play activities and such have much greater duration. So we've looked at a number of different configurations of the site. I think for us, scale was a big one.
Okay.
And for us, I think the concern of massing a great deal of scale against a residential street outweighs the concern of the doors closing in the parking area.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could perhaps come up and walk us through some of the materials. on whichever elevation or whichever perspective or that you think is appropriate, just walk us through some of the major building elevation and its specific material.
Sure. Would you like me to
Please do, yeah,
approach
come on
the
up.
board?
And Mr. Ellis, if we could give him a
Yes,
pointer.
I can harm it.
On this board,
And forgive me, just to make sure that what is being said is actually recorded, if you don't mind speaking into the microphone hanging right above you.
You might want to move the boards back a little bit, just so you can get closer to the mics.
That would be a lot of work, I'll just move out of the
Talk louder.
Just talk
louder.
Project.
I will
There
speak
you are.
loudly.
Thank you.
Sure. The rammed earth wall is this wall here. This wall wraps the entire site. So you can see it literally comes around the edge of the building. And that's pointing to it there. You can see it probably pretty clearly here in these brown lines that wrap. Above the rammed earth walls, there's actually a green roof structure. So there's landscape at the roof level that kind of the buildings nestle into here, which do a number of things in terms of greater insulation, stormwater management, and visually then creates a kind of soft landscape band above the rammed earth. The roofs themselves are fairly reflective. No one will see them, but that's just simply to keep the heat from absorbing into the building. These materials along here, we're actually in a bit of debate right now. We're looking at wood materials and composite wood materials and the environmental benefits and disadvantages of each of those. The woods can be sustainably harvested. The manufactured materials can also be considered. So we're kind of debating those two. Let's see.
Look at the lambert here.
Sure. Also, this structure here that kind of animates that front facade is also a structure that supports the photovoltaic panels.
And is that some sort of a metal structure?
It is. It's a steel structure there.
With the solar panels on top of it?
Solar panels on top, correct. This is on the flower side, so you can see the rammed earth base, and then these little light monitors that bring natural light deep into the building for natural daylighting.
What were some of the main reasons for using the rammed earth as a material?
We like the texture of it, the color of it, the fact that it's a pretty environmentally sensitive material. It also gives us a great deal of environmental buffer between the inside and the outside, so it helps us modulate the temperatures between those two pretty comfortably. It's a great...
So it's actually an exterior wall.
Correct. It's a thermal mass wall, so it's a big, heavy mass wall.
And it sustains itself, not environmentally, but it weathers itself well over time as well?
Yeah, it's stabilized, and then it's sealed on the outside, so moisture doesn't actually penetrate it.
Some sort of adobe almost.
Yeah, we're doing a complete home right now out of the material. And in the traditional sense, you let it erode and you just put more mud back on. We move beyond that, and you keep the moisture from penetrating the earth that composes. Are there other materials?
Do you have any other questions for the architect?
Can you just talk a little bit about, I think I have a better understanding now of the materials that you're talking about. Maybe you could talk about, because it seems like you have sort of the thermal wall that you're talking about. You have a lot of the open glass areas for the main admin areas. But it seems like you're using them both on the south and northern side, maybe not maximizing the material itself. In regards to exposure, I guess?
In terms of the glass, or are you talking about the
I guess
thermal
both.
mass?
Because the thermal mass, I see it on here on the southern portion where there's going to be a lot of sun exposure.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of it on the northern portion. I guess would it work better on the southern part or on this northern part, just material-wise, I guess?
Well, they're kind of accomplishing different things on the two sides, on the two exposures. On the southern side is where we need the most protection.
Right.
But at the same time, the southern sun is also a great thing when it comes to daylighting.
Right.
So
Which is what you're capturing with that.
Right. The scoop of the roof is really an attempt to bring light into the building. So we're trying to mitigate the negative impacts and take advantage of the positive impact, and trying to get that light in the building. Those light monitors are attempting to do that. And the building section that was up here a moment ago, if you can look at that, you can see there's shading to keep direct sunlight coming in, and we're trying to bounce that sunlight into the building on the southern side. On the northern side, it's actually used more for ventilation, opening to allow our warmer air to come out of the building.
But that's on the stacks, right, that you have?
Correct.
But not the actual wall itself.
Right. On the north side of the building, we actually penetrate that wall more so on the north side because we don't have as much thermal pressure.
Okay.
So those are operable windows on the northern side over here where the heat escapes?
Yes. Yeah, that's
Are they
exactly the goal.
They're automatic as well?
Yes. And you can see the landscape concept of kind of animating that edge. And a lot of this is about showing ways to use environmental technologies. The goal was that these are younger kids, parents, to use the opportunity for Disney to really teach about environmental concerns. So some of it is trying to be expressive about some of these environmental things. We could hide the photovoltaics completely. Disney's really asking us to show those technologies, bring them forward, and use them as teaching opportunities, which is fun for us as architects.
Those louvers on the south windows, are they fixed louvers on the administration? Yeah, I'm looking at the colored rendering here.
They actually
So
are.
how do you wash the windows behind those?
The washing the windows behind them. Write that down.
You can see what job I do at home. But
Yes, we'll have to think about that. They're separated from the glass.
Right.
So it's a great point to make.
Children have very small hands.
luckily they're on the second floor.
push 'em up there.
This is pretty dusty in Southern California.
Part of their community service.
All right.
Well, do we have any more questions for the architect?
Just one more. On site planning wise, basically the main entry is going to be here.
Correct.
So even if you're up here coming in, you do have to kind of circle back into here to get into the main facility.
As a pedestrian, or are you talking about
As a
auto?
pedestrian.
Yes, you would. Well, the pedestrians also have
One entrance.
an entrance on Paula up here.
Okay, so there's an entrance.
I'm sorry. There we go.
There,
Sorry.
right.
Oh, so you do have to circle around.
Circle around.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, you'd come down and then, but the idea was you have one point of control. It's a security
It's a security.
concern, is you only have one way in. and
Which corner is the crosswalk at that connects it to the other Disney campus?
There's one
out. It's
here.
here.
Okay, so that would make sense for the entrance to be on that side.
There's 2 crosswalks at Davis also.
One on each side?
There's one on
We can't have cross-communication because it's being recorded, so we can't
We have a
hear.
crosswalk on both sides.
You can see
Yeah, you can see it.
One here, one here.
Are you involved with the Flower Street, the plans on Flower Street for what they're landscaping? And I mentioned that it was going to be widened. Are you, any activity in that?
We are not involved in it.
I'm just wondering what happens on the Davis Street when you come back out to make the left turn, because if you're dropping off your kids and you're not a parent, or not parking at Disney, you're going to be making a left to go back to Sonora. And
We're not
you're not into that, okay.
You're welcome to ask Disney to ask us to be involved.
Yeah, no, I'm not getting jobs ready, but thanks anyway, okay. Thank you.
Have there been any discussions to post no parking signs off of Paula to help with the queue of cars coming in? Has that discussion occurred with
We've
transportation?
had that discussion internally. I think it's a great concept.
Right.
Okay. Are they really going to be here on the northern side?
Say that again.
Is that really going to be there? Side?
Yes. The fenestration, the glass.
No, the louvers, I guess, on the northern side.
Yeah, we've talked about that. At that point, they would be aesthetic only. They're not providing a function on the northern side. We don't need the screening. We could remove them to let as much light in as possible.
Mr. Chair, members of
Yeah, go ahead.
members of the board, the question came up earlier about the potential for flipping the site essentially to have the buildings towards Truitt's side. There's two problems with that. The most fundamental is that in the scope of development, it specifically requires at this location that the buildings be 65 feet from the street right-of-way.
That's a problem.
Within the 65 feet.
No, the buildings have to be kept out of the 65-foot
Right.
zone from the Truitt Street right-of-way back. So no building, according to the scope of development, can be in that 65-foot area.
And there's no such restrictions along Flower?
No, the scope of development clearly is attempting to push buildings towards Flower Street.
Very good. Well, do we have any more questions for the architect? So with that, we have a long day.
Thank you.
We're going to try to speed things along now. Our next speaker is Susan Goldsman. Goldsman?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
We're excited about being here as well, and I'm going to give you a broad overview of the landscape and the children's play area, and I brought Holly Cooligan with me, too, because she did the planting plan, and if you have very specific questions on particular plants, Holly will be able to answer that. But it's harder to see back there, so we're going to pull them up. Pull it so the public can see.
And please note, you do have a 3-minute limit.
I understand. Our whole concept here with the landscape is really to connect children back to nature and to really use the outdoor environment, the play environment, to do that interactively, both on the site and internally with the play environment. So that's the whole concept behind it, and I won't go into any details about it because you can ask us questions if you're interested in how we did it and what elements are in the children's play area. But for the outside environment, where's the site?
Take a pointer.
We need the,
You could come up here if you would like.
well,
This
I
one?
just want to get the right,
Oh.
so you can see the, we have a number of illustrations of the different landscape features for the streets. And I'm going to turn it over to Holly, but the whole entire intent was to really make this a very friendly, welcoming environment to the neighborhood. So it really enhances what's out there instead of a stark, hot environment. We've tried to cool it down with a beautiful planting plan that reflects the master plan criteria. So I'm going to turn it over to Holly, and I'm going to point things as she's talking about.
Thank you. Like she mentioned, our overall planting scheme is to really pack in the color and the contrasting textures here and really add this as a community amenity and make it beautiful for the neighbors and the community, and also definitely screen the parking area using dense plantings, color, and texture again. And I want to stress we're using low water requirements. The plants are low water. And also, again, stress that the area along Truitt, it's the long side of the block. So we've used dense flowering vines and bold accent plants to really break up the space and have in the parkway area some really dense, colorful plants.
So we have the ribbons of color going through various plants to break up that wall.
Forgive us, No, that's quite all right. It's just to make sure that everyone is able to hear what you're saying, we ask that you speak into the microphone.
So as Susan was saying, it's going to really provide seasonal interest. So we have flowering, colorful foliage all year round. And also, just for safety and visibility, on the parkways we have low plants so that we really maintain the safety there. And just to wrap up again, we have waves of color. So I've really tried to provide a rhythmic wave of color for the whole area.
And what is being presented right now is the southern.
This is along Truitt.
Right. And it seems as though there is 3 layers of landscaping really that go back from the sidewalk up to it.
Right. It really provides a buffer along the area.
We need you to be. Yeah. We can only speak one at a time. Very good. Do we have a
Quick question. If, in fact, there was some articulation in that wall, how would that affect your plan?
Well, you can do it either way. We feel that we've spent the money wisely by using the plants as the articulation. There's probably, you'll get more bang for your buck if we put more vegetation out on the sidewalks rather than spending the money trying to articulate that wall, in my opinion.
Doesn't that give you a little more planning area if there's some articulations in it?
It does. You take something away, you give it back. You're taking it away from the play area or from the back of the...
Well, it's the parking area, so right now, the way it looks, there's certain cutouts already built into the
There
parking.
are, but it's pretty tight.
Right.
It's pretty tight.
The vines kind of create their own little alcoves, and within those alcoves are bold accent plants, so it really does break up the space very well.
No, of course, there's seasons here. Everything's evergreen, everything's every color. You guys are from Berkeley, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You guys are
Not in my
very lucky.
backyard, there isn't. There's certainly a change as the year goes by, but...
In every backyard, it changes.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ken Howard, who's a neighbor.
Without going to spend time, can I have a picture put on an easel?
Of course.
It's existing.
You need to talk into the microphone, though, and state your name for the record if you
Ken
would.
Howard.
We won't count this toward your time.
Wait, what's the shot of?
It's the existing corner shot showing the existing building as it is.
That one?
That's Davis.
You want the other corner?
Right, the other corner.
Is it the first picture?
That one.
Yes, perfect, thank you.
There you go. You and me.
Raise it up a little bit. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. What I would like to talk about is basically a very brief summation of the history of the site. Initially, this was a walnut orchard that included the whole facility, which included the actual airport, too. If you walk down into some of the residential streets, you'll see some of the existing walnut orchards that are still there, some of the trees. Not too many left, but they're still there. World War II came, and they took out those trees, and they built 6 buildings that were basically made for barracks for the P-38 pilots that scrambled to their planes across the street on Flower and Paula. And these lasted, of course, for the entire war. These were knocked down, and probably the late 40s, early 50s, and it became pretty much in the early 50s, in the late 50s, early 60s, the existing buildings were built. The construction housed manufacturing, and at that location that we're seeing right now was a company called Royce Photographics, which was a photochemical facility that processed film and also had much in the way of chemicals there. I have not heard any issues as to ongoing phase ones that's going to take place when they demolish this building and 3 buildings. That this would be an environmental site assessment prepared which identifies potential or existing environmental contamination. The National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, has a signage on buildings that has color codes, that has numbers in them. And these buildings, all 3 of them had those chemicals in those buildings. They had blue for health hazard, they had red for fire hazard, yellow for reactivity, and they had white for specific hazard. That was basically meant for employees and outside emergency responders at this location. I'm basically recommending that even though, if it doesn't call for it, a phase 1 should be poked all over that facility based upon the fact that children are going to be on that. Egress on Davis Street. If nothing happens to the issues of parking on Flower, visibility is going to be very, very bad. Parents with their children egressing off of Davis and ingressing onto Flower, it's going to be very dangerous. We're also having a problem now with a freeway flyover expansion, which is being built right now. Flower Street, as you see at that corner, is a 3-way intersection. It really is a 4-way if you take into consideration across the street is Disney's parking lot, which they use to come in and out of. If you were to take a white linen rag and stick it on a stick and put it in that corner, pick it up, put it in the morning and pick it up at night, you'll see a lot of dust and debris on it. It'll be very interesting why Disney has decided to put children at this location based upon the fact that cars break and dust particles come off their brakes, and they accelerate and exhaust. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Margie Lin.
Hi, it's Margie Liu. I have a question, please, regarding the movements of cars in and out. Is there a gate that's going to be left open for the duration of the drop-off and pickup time? Because electronic gates take a while to open and close. So the concerns for traffic and the backup of traffic.
It does show a gate on
Okay.
both sides.
So will that gate,
I'm assuming it'll be open from certain hour to certain hour.
Okay.
And we can verify that with
Yeah.
the applicant, with the rebuttal. Okay, so we'll ask that question for you.
okay. In a letter that was put out by the Disney Core Services on July 11th, under the details of the project bullets, the letter stated that cars will be directed to Paula and Davis Avenues, overflow parking. This was addressed in the Disney open house. And we're looking into, the neighbors are looking into preferential parking. Our concern is with the Disney employee parking, this hasn't even happened yet, and they park in our neighborhood with sufficient parking in Disney. If we do not get preferential parking for whatever reason, we already have 75%, well, there'll be some way that this could be monitored. I mean, Mr. Gilbert said that, you know, they're going to direct the employees not to park there. Is there a way that City of Glendale can help us monitor this? We're only a 4-block little neighborhood, and this is going to greatly impact our neighborhood.
Okay. Well, I've written down your questions, and we'll certainly ask him
Okay.
what the applicant, as he comes up for his rebuttal.
All right, and where do we go from here? As we've got the 75% of the neighborhood or the ones that want the preferential parking. Where do we go from there to realize preferential parking permits?
We would direct you to the Traffic and Transportation Department and the Public Works.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is John Pera.
Hi, my name is John Pera. I reside at 1312 Truett Street. It's a very nice neighborhood. I've been there my whole life. My father grew up there. You know, our family bought that home when there was walnut orchards, nothing else. You know, people say it was loud and busy with an airport, but, you know, the airplanes in 1939 were quite quiet, especially 2 blocks away. You know, Disney wasn't even around back then. He was making films with Iworks. But, you know, I think it's a beautiful project. You know, my concerns are the contamination in the soil. You know, because on the original plan, this whole area is a, you know, Superfund zone. Roy's photographic, as he explained, which is in the building, which is right there, had many chemicals, you know, dating back to the 50s. The building on the corner of Davis and Flower was Technical Oil Tool Company, and they had solvents and oils. So, you know, my concern is soil contamination during construction. You know, we have a lot of elderly residents. And the biggest concern of all is the traffic and the parking. I don't know, I ask all of you during the week, maybe take 2 trips during the rush hour traffic in the morning and afternoon. Make a left-hand turn off of Davis onto Flower. Last week I did it. The longest it's ever taken me is 27 minutes to make a left-hand turn. How is that going to facilitate, say, 75 cars in an hour? There's absolutely no way Davis and Flower during any traffic can facilitate that. There's a bus drop-off on right in front of the building 13, I think the last building, which is at Davis and Flower. But there's always 3 or 4 buses, plus private buses that are blocking everything. And west of Davis, the buses stop and let people off. You can't see, you can't go because there's people crossing the mid-block all over the place. I mean, right now, that's the situation. What are we going to do with, you know, 380 people roughly coming and going? You know, Disney addresses it and says, you know, they have parking, but right now we have people. I've had problems blocking my driveway. You call Glendale Police 3 hours later, you know, police show up, give them a ticket. what does that do? I still can't get my car out of my driveway. You know, and I want them towed. That's about it.
I have a quick question for you. You mentioned that buses, there's the public transportation that lines up.
There's one public transportation drop-off at Sonora, west, at the corner of Sonora, just west on Flower, you know, just west of Sonora.
So just west of Davis?
Actually,
2 blocks.
2 blocks, there's a drop-off, and then there's a drop-off right in front of east of Davis at Flower.
So
But during the morning, they will drop off.
At this corner, there's
Correct.
a bus stop.
There's an actual, for the B line. But there's usually buses there. There's huge transit buses with, you know, Asian, I guess Japanese.
Are they tourist buses, chartered buses?
They're charter buses used by Disney. And I mean, it's a pretty regular basis, plus other transportation is dropping off west of Davis. So, you know, we'd kind of requested a 4-way stop at Davis. You know, there's no way people are going to get out of there.
Is there a 4-way at Paula already?
There's a 4-way at Paula. It's dangerous.
Right, but
you know, because people don't stop. But, you know, at least you can get out. Like I said, I never exit on Davis. When I got my notice a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, I went left on Davis. Took me 27 minutes. How many parents are going to wait 27 minutes to make a turn? They're going to be parking on Truett, Paula, Davis, walking kids around, exiting that way. So we've, you know, are going to facilitate. I don't want our neighborhood stepped on.
Right.
You know, I like development. I think it's beautiful. I mean, it's a gorgeous building. You know, my concerns are toxic waste and traffic.
Do we have any more questions for the speaker?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Carla Haskell.
Carla, pull it down.
You could pull it down and state your name.
All the
for
way,
the
all the way,
record.
right? Make yourself comfortable.
There you are.
There you go.
Okay. I live on Davis, and as it is now,
You would state your name for the record.
Carla Haskell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I live on Davis, and as it is now, I don't make left turns from Davis onto Flower at all, because I find it to be a very dangerous intersection. And you're talking about bringing at least 300 new cars into that area, if you count the kids, the mothers, the teachers, and all that. That's 300 people. And that is just unacceptable. I feel that the residents of Glendale are mostly ignored. I've gone to so many of these meetings. We went to a meeting because we didn't want a railroad crossing. Is the railroad crossing going to be there? You bet it is. We went to a meeting not to have the heliport. Is there a heliport? You bet there is. And it just seems to me that Disney has huge amounts of land. They have parking lots where they're empty, half empty. Why build in front of a residential community? I live in this area, and I'm happy that I live here. I'm retired. I can't afford to live anywhere else. Most of the people who live in our area are working people. They aren't here at the meeting because they can't make a 5 o'clock meeting. So this is really forcing a lot of people to decide whether or not to sell their houses. And can I live in Glendale if I sell my house at the reduced amount of money that it'll be worth? No, I will not be able to. I'm a retired teacher living on a very limited budget. I think that I love this program. I wish they'd had child care centers like this when my daughter was young, and I couldn't find babysitting for her when I had to go back to work when she was 8 weeks old. I love child care centers, not on this street and not in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The next speaker is Yolanda Lowry.
Hi, I'm Yolanda Lacombe Lowry, and I live at 1327 Spazier. And I'd like to speak on behalf of myself, and my husband's got a bit of laryngitis. I'd like to speak for him also. He's here with me.
Okay.
Okay?
Of course.
And So,
So do you require more time? Or
Huh?
do you require more time? Is that what you're asking for?
I might. It's pretty brief, both of them put together.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is mine. Part of the American dream is that everybody, this is regarding the addition at 1346 Alameda.
I'm sorry, this is...
Wrong project.
Wrong project.
It's the different project.
Different
So
project.
Alameda will be the next project
And
to be discussed.
I apologize for calling your name out. It was actually my fault. It was placed in the wrong file, so I apologize.
I apologize.
We'll call you back in
I'll
about...
see you on my street.
We'll call you back in about half an hour.
I was trying to make space.
Well, with that, I don't think I have any other cards for this project, which is 1,300 Flower. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on the subject? If so, you could come up and then fill out a card afterwards. Very good. We had discussed that the applicant combined, whether it's the applicant and the architect or just the architect, in whichever order you guys choose to do it, holistically get 8 minutes. So who would like to come up and represent the applicant for the rebuttal? And then we're going to basically ask you some questions at the end, but if you would address some of the concerns that were raised.
Before we do that, Chair, I think we have some written communications that we'd like to communicate to you.
Very good.
Prior to the rebuttal.
Very good.
Go sit down, Ed.
And who's going to...
Actually, Jeff...
Mr. Hamilton is?
One moment, please.
That's Highland. That's all Highland.
Just for the record, there was an email sent in by Joanne Hedge, who is president of the Glendale Rancho Homeowners Association. So all of you have received a copy of that detailed email.
Yes, we have.
Well, we just wanted to make note of that. Also, because there is not an 8-minute timer, what we'll do is, why don't I'll just go ahead and break it up, so there'll be 5 minutes and then an additional 3 minutes for conclusions, all right?
Fair enough. Is there any other comments or questions from staff?
No.
No?
Where'd Ed go?
Oh, wait.
You're efficient.
Now, would this be an additional speaker, or would you like to just be part of the rebuttal? Okay, and so as I just stated, we'll have 5 minutes and then 3 minutes, so.
My name is Ed Hukla. I'm Senior Vice President of Corporate Real Estate, and I was a middle child, so I talk fast.
That's where I got it.
Yeah, there we go. So I want to address comments in groups first. First of all, being here with the site and the environmental nature of the site. I want to state unequivocally that the concern for the safety of our employees and for the community around us is our #1 priority. Prior to the acquisition of the land, we bored thousands of holes, did tremendous amount of due diligence, went through an extensive geotechnical and environmental analysis as part of the EIR. There's a whole vast array of mitigation measures that we have to comply with. We will comply with every single one. So there's measures about demolition, there's measures about abatement in the buildings, there's measures about testing the soil that gets taken off the site. There's measures tied to everything to do with construction. We will abide by every one of those, very comprehensively included in the EIR. Second issue is the notion of the site as an environmental problem. Have to separate the site from the Crystal Springs Superfund site, which is the aquifer, which is about 60 feet below the site. Our site itself is not an environmental problem. It's the aquifer below. So I wanted to make that distinction. Often people link those two and confuse those. Second issue I wanted to address was massing of the buildings and why the building is placed on Flower Street and why parking is along Truett. One is we're thinking the most sensitive thing to the neighbors is to push against the edge of Flower. But more importantly, as part of the master plan and the urban design for Flower Street, the goal was to put to build a face of Flower with this transformed street that will widen tremendous amount into Disney property to the north, and you wanted to hold the edges along Flower, and you didn't want gaps. As a matter of fact, it was important to hold corners. It was important to make a face on Flower to create a really important kind of monumental street. So, as a matter of fact, through our guidelines, we're not allowed to, we can't set back too much. So there's the issue there. In terms of traffic, we believe that the traffic is as thoughtful as possible, right in, right out only. With drop-off, there's 24 dedicated drop-off spaces, so for people coming and going, and Carol Davis Fernaldez, our operator, she's here, the waves of people start at 7 and go till 10 o'clock. So we have creative people who show up at 10 and leave at 1 in the morning. So it's not like there's a mass parking at 7 and a mass exodus at 5. The center operates from 7 to 7, end of story. There's no additional time frames. So in terms of neighborhood parking, I've got to tell you, we met with the community, people like Margie, people like Carla, people like John, who actually we were involved with during the GC3 entitlements process. We love their comments. We love what they say. Our goal is to always be a good neighbor. Our goal is to do our utmost to be sensitive. We absolutely support anything the neighbors want to do to try and control parking in there, and unfortunately, I have to say that some Disney people do park under their trees, and I understand how that would be an issue. We would be completely supportive of that. The thing I do want to bring up, however, is that prior to the demolition of these 3 buildings, as Adam mentioned, there was 120 people in there, so there was dramatically more activity. There'll be kids dropped off. There's 77 employees that come in shifts. Obviously, this is a 12-hour operation. So in terms of the density of people and the concern about the number of people short of drop-off and pickup, the actual density will go down. Remember, we're taking a site that's entitled for 100,000 square feet and had 40,000 square feet on, and we're building 23,000 square feet. So as a kind of sensitive gesture to the neighborhood, we think it doesn't get much better under building. I want to emphasize that, again, we will work with the neighbors. We will support a preferential parking program that is absolutely consistent and in keeping with what we'd like to do to be good neighbors. The bus drop-off information that Mr. Parrish shared is inaccurate. We do not have charter buses with Asians dropping off at our site. So if they are buses, they tend to be the Glendale B line. We support because we like our people to commute and use public transit instead of drive their cars. In terms of the gate operation, the gate will remain open. So Margie raised a very good, Ms. Liu raised a very good issue that we didn't want the gate opening and closing to intercede and interfere with the coming and going of cars. Regarding the landscape wall, the building, so not a sword to fall on in terms of how articulated it is or isn't. We think there's a beautiful landscape approach to it that's very simple and very elegant. We personally think that articulating the wall, instead of taking a very simple element and letting it exist in the landscape with landscape, colorful flowers in front of it, we think that's better and less fussy. But I don't think that's a sword that, the world wouldn't end if some articulation had to occur. Board member, you asked questions about the rammed earth walls and how it was and wasn't used and articulated on the south and north facade. I think Mr. Leo Marmol did a really nice job explaining that. Another thing, there's a kind of uniformity of architecture that we want around the building. Controlling the apertures and openings was important. I hope I've covered all the issues.
Well, thank you. Do we have questions?
I have a quick question for you. On behalf of the neighbors, would you guys come up with a single point, a contact point during the demolition and construction phase where if they have an issue, there's somebody they know? Would it be your cell phone? I don't know.
Well, no, there's a hotline developed for construction, and we are at the community meeting. I did give them my phone number. They know who to call, and they have my phone number. So, and I want to commit and tell them that there's nothing but goodwill on our part to want to work with them and be thoughtful neighbors like I think we are. And if there's issues, and they have issues with us, we are more than happy to call. The good news is we're a company with resources and care deeply about our neighbors, and we'll address those concerns. So they have the numbers and they can call.
One last, the stop sign or the traffic, your plan for Flower, obviously, as Mr. Your architect said, not his deal, don't want to give him the job, but are you anticipating a stop, some type of signal, something there to make this issue that was brought up, which I think I saw too?
So, Board Member Ellis, remember that Flower Street will dramatically transform. It will be widened. There'll be a tremendous median. On-street parking will be taken off, pushed into structures on Disney property. Bike lanes will be introduced, and signalization process will be signals will be introduced over time.
Right.
So we are bound to, and the city actually, through the tax increment that is generated, is bound to widen the street and beautify the street. It'll be a spectacular signature street when that happens. We would support anything that the traffic department believes interim would work to help control traffic. So if Mr. Bagdanian believes that a stop sign at Davis might improve things and might make the lives of neighbors better, and does the analysis to support that. We have no issue with that.
No, that was going to be
We
my
have no
question.
issue with that.
It seems like a big issue is concerning the potential of making a left turn from Davis onto Flower, and the cars stacking up in a queue to try to make that left turn. Prior to that, or perhaps a stop sign could be put there. Maybe this is a question for the architect, is if you just flip the parking to be one way coming off of Dave, or in from Davis and out from where you currently have a stop sign, easy, done, and you don't really affect the design of the thing. You just flip it so that they come in this way and go out where we currently have.
Everybody's making a left turn, though.
Left
All
turn.
left
There's a
turn.
stop sign.
Yeah, but so here's look, for someone like Mr. Bagdanian and others who know much more about traffic than we, typically right turns are the most efficient and the fastest to do, so we come up with a loop that relies on right turns all along. If you do what you suggested, Board Member Insua, you end up turning left into the parking lot and potentially really blocking traffic that's moving up Davis.
Well, left into this parking lot.
Right.
What you're saying, but
Right.
left here is a quiet neighborhood, so, a left turn here, I think, is less problematic than trying to make a left-hand turn off of Flower.
Although if Mr. Para today is describing 27 minutes to get out without the child care center there, I'm not sure how much traffic there is in the morning. My guess is that right turn movements might be more efficient.
You mean right turn off onto Flower?
Right, as shown today, right off Paula, right in, right out.
Okay, but with a car coming out here, it forces a car now to here, correct?
Right.
And what happens if a car wants to make a left-hand turn on the Flower? Currently, there's no stop sign there.
That's correct.
And there's high vehicular traffic.
That's correct.
So the concern is that the reason people can't get out there is because of the high vehicular traffic, especially coming to work in the morning, and if you exacerbate that issue with now bringing in queuing cars, there's a potential that these cars are going to start backing up into your lot. But if you flip it, where you do have currently a stop sign, every car's got to stop, every car's got to...
Or on the other hand, Board Member Insua, I might suggest that a stop sign at Davis might help, so controlling traffic at Davis might work as well.
Absolutely.
Let me try to put a little bit of I think people have the impression that there's 236 cars, mothers and fathers lined up to drop off their precious little cargo in the morning. It's a slow trickle of folks that come in. So some come in at 7, some come in at 7:15, some at 7:20, some at 7:30, some at 8 o'clock, some at 9 o'clock, some at 9:15, some at 11 o'clock. So I want to emphasize that this is not a crush of people coming. There's 24 spaces for them to park when they do arrive. So based on our experience in Burbank, where we've had more than a decade operating, we don't have that crush in the morning or the evening.
Do you have assigned batches? In other words, do you anticipate the daycare saying so many people have to drop off between 7 and 7:15? So many people between 7:15 and 7:30?
No. And I think, Chairman Simonian, it just naturally works itself out. So parents, you get a group of 236 kids with parents, everyone kind of figures out when they do or don't arrive, and they do or don't arrive. Sometimes you're late, sometimes you've got a doctor's appointment, sometimes it's just not it's not that scientific. But I want to assure you that in Burbank, there's no crush in the morning and no crush in the evening. It's a slow trickle in and a slow trickle out. I don't want to minimize the fact that there's 236 kids, but it's not a crush of people in and a crush of people out.
It's that time where school begins. It's not a school.
Exactly.
And every parent, given that it is daycare, every parent will have to park, unload their precious cargo.
Right.
Sign the kid in.
That's right.
And then leave.
That's right. And that's why there's 24 spaces.
Right. And so it's not going to be like a school drop-off, throw junior out, and then you're off.
No.
Right,
so that not only that, from a security standpoint.
And so a thought that I was having won't work. I thought, well, since you're going to widen the street of Flower anyway, why don't you? And it's not going to work. Why don't you just have a queuing drop-off here, an extra lane? It ain't going to work because that's not the function of this place. People have to get out and take junior out.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the other thing, Board Member Insua, in the long-term plan, one of the things is there's parking on all the public streets right now. Disney is committed in all the streets that it fronts to remove public parking from those streets, introduce bike lanes, a 7-foot parkway, a 5-foot pedestrian sidewalk, a 15-foot landscape setback, 10 to 15-foot landscape setback, and a dramatic street tree program. So to introduce cars parked along Flower wouldn't work.
Right.
Wouldn't work.
When do you anticipate the Flower Street becoming
Board Member Ellis, there's a threshold of improvements based on how much we develop. So based on, I think it's the fourth phase of development of GC3 that trips the widening of Flower Street. And I want to be, again, part of our goal with our neighbors was to create a wonderful place for them to be and walk. I think the city of Glendale will be proud. This will be a signature street, 4 rows of jacarandas and eucalyptus, spectacular understory planting, a 26-foot planted median, kind of all the things that I think a great urban street kind of needs.
Is there going...
there it is. There you go.
There you go. At this specific point, which I guess this might answer my question, the median is going to be landscaped as opposed to 2 sets of double lines where people pull into almost like a queue. Is that correct? Or is it going to be landscaped?
No, we've done, at full development, the median's wide enough that one lane is taken out with proper stacking and queuing to turn into parking structures.
But there's going to be only the future.
Yeah.
At some point, whatever is triggered that the street gets improved.
Right.
At some point, that improvement's going to happen. There's going to be a dedication off of Flower.
Exactly. We dedicate, please don't quote me, about 90 feet of Disney property.
Well, whatever the number is.
Right.
And so what I'm trying to understand is the center median that's going to be constructed.
Yep.
Is it going to be landscaped, or is it going to be an area where cars could queue into to turn left onto?
Both. So it's wide enough. The median's 26 feet wide, so where you do need to put turn pockets in, you take one lane out and you've got one lane left.
And so do you anticipate an only lane being installed at the corner of Flower and Paula to turn in?
There's a major turn in there into a parking structure that will be built on Paula, and the guard booth is set back several hundred feet, so there's plenty of stacking within the...
I'm talking about the left side. In order to, so if you're going northbound on Flower Street,
yeah,
and you want to turn left on Paula,
yes, there is a pocket there. Yes, there is a pocket there.
What I'm suggesting is if there is an only lane along Flower Street to turn left onto Paula, it would be quite safe for cars to queue into over there to get out of the way of Flower Street and then basically turn left onto it.
Sure, and Paula will be signalized. So in the future state, Paula gets signalized. That's correct.
Wonderful.
So Paula's signalized.
I think Mr. Gilbert had mentioned that there was one meeting that was held with the community to get their input. I think he mentioned there was about a week before. Now, were there any other meetings conducted with the community besides that one?
No. We had, during the GC3 process, of course, the entitlement process is months and months and months.
But not project-specific, though?
No, just this one meeting.
Okay. And were there any issues that had come up at that meeting that were maybe informed some of the decisions that were maybe slightly changed things?
The parking in the neighborhood. I think we're supportive of controlling parking in their neighborhood.
The 75% that she was talking about, is that what?
I'm not sure, Ms. Liu. We weren't talking percentages at that point, but we were supportive of a program that would make permit parking or restrict parking. We thought that was a terrific idea, and we'd be very supportive of it.
I see. Okay.
Mr. Board Member Yu, I think Traffic Department, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they use the 75% as a threshold for establishing the permit parking
Basically, if
arrangement.
75% of the people agree on it, then...
I think that's the way it is.
Thanks.
And Board Member Simonian, in the EIR, there is a fully illustrated version of the full build-out plan, so you can see turn movements and, the medians and so forth are all laid out, and signalization and so forth is spelled out in detail.
Well, if it is signalized, it certainly makes some sense as you're going north on Flower to turn left on Paula, because that corner, that intersection is going to be signalized.
Correct.
Which is safe in itself, and then you turn left, and then you turn into the project.
And you're bringing up a good point that although we believe the design today works best from a flow standpoint, we're also looking to a future state, which is the widened street with signalization and turn pockets. So long-term, we believe it works best as well.
Okay. Very good. I don't think we have any more questions for Mr. Chula. And so there is 3 minutes that the applicant has, an additional 3 minutes if you so choose to use it. If not, we certainly could close the public hearing and move on to discussion.
There was one other thing I wanted to mention. We talked about rammed earth, and the rammed earth that we show looks a little plain. One of the wonderful things about rammed earth is the process of of ramming the earth into forms leaves a beautiful subtle pattern of waves through the wall. So you can control based on the dirt, and of course, Marmol Ratziner's been very careful about the kind of dirt in Glendale. The mix you'd have to do would be rather gray. But there's a wave pattern that appears in the wall that looks kind of like natural striations of a kind of, it's a geology wall. So I wanted you to leave with the fact that the rammed earth wall is not only environmentally really sensitive, but really quite beautiful because it's got this texture and pattern to it that I think is pretty unique.
Is there any place that you've used it?
We haven't. So, Board Member Ellis, we're looking to be trailblazers, and we hear that we will be the first Gold LEED certified building in the city of Glendale, and mighty proud of that. So.
I mean, any place else in Burbank, or you just any other?
Leo Marmo mentioned they're working on a house. Is it in this area? No? Okay. We have pictures of a rammed earth project in Las Vegas that's pretty spectacular with that waves and striations across, but really a beautiful kind of handmade but very architecturally clean approach.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, since the applicant has concluded its presentation and therefore its rebuttal as well, then we are going to close the public session of the hearing and start the discussion of this project. So, Mr. Insua, do you want to take the first stab at this?
Sure. Fortunately, we've been listening to this project for close to an hour and 45 minutes, so a lot of my questions and concerns and stuff have been essentially checked off, because when you look at the initial site plan, I see potential problems, not with the architecture. The architecture is terrific. I love that Burbank Center. I used to drive by it all the time, and I always wondered who that architect was, and it's great work. So I think architecturally, you did a great job, and utilizing the natural environment with a LEED Gold certification, a great way to show that huge corporation is sensitive to our resources. The only one that I initially reacted, and I had the reaction, was the parking, and the parking with respect to the residences. As the discussions continued, obviously, there's a setback issue, which is already in the development requirements. So, okay, we can't do that. Then I started thinking about, well, what if we did a queuing on the top? Well, you can't do that because it's not a school, it's a daycare. Kids need to be signed off. I'll check that off. So as I went through some of those concerns, each ones were answered well, and I did not see anything, at least at this time, in an hour and 45 minutes, that could then be as an option for them to explore. So if I was a resident across the street from this development, I think that those concerns have been solved well. I think the architecture is wonderful. I think the existing buildings are dated, and they were never designed to be a design showpiece. They were designed to be functional. Concrete tilt-up, low industrial manufacturing and whatnot. Again, I want to say, there's no place that they can put this parking. The parking has to be here, because they're already 65 feet from the property line, and they can't modify it. I was thinking maybe we put the parking off of Davis, off of that side, but I don't think your parking is big enough, and then you'd have a bad loop coming in. So with respect to the parking, I think it's done well. And if we broke up, I think, this area with parking, you lose that streetscape that's really important for this building. So parking here and a smaller building, it just doesn't look good. So for me, all those tons of questions that I had have been answered, and I think this center is really going to engage the community. I like living next to schools, especially not high schools, but lower end schools. So that noise of kids playing and stuff I think is a benefit for any community. So they're going to have that. So I'm comfortable with what I've seen, and again, how all those questions that I had have been answered through the process. So.
Thank you very much. Mr. Yu?
Sure. I think that there's something to be said for all the neighbors that have come out, and we thank you for your time coming out. I think you're right. The issue is basically the parking and the amount of people that will be circulating through there. It does concern me. And I don't know, I guess having that one meeting is a good thing, but maybe it was more of a informational, one-way meeting, and not something to sort of get a sense for what was happening in the neighborhood and what maybe the concerns were. And then I have to balance that out with the fact that the things that were presented and if this project was going on this site, which is the best way of siting it and functioning on the site. And some of those questions, I think, get answered. I think the sort of the numbers that were spotted out in the last, the person that came up, there really is going to be sort of less use, less square footage on the site compared to what was there now and what was there before. And so, you know, if to balance all of that, architecturally, I mean, it's a great piece, and I'm familiar with your work, and I think, you know, you've done a great job here. The only one thing that I would talk about is sort of the southern fence, and maybe reconsider that, because you are so creative with the way you use the horizontal slots, and, you know, how they start turning and start mimicking some of the, maybe the earth, the rammed dirt, how it sort of stratiates along that. Maybe play with that. I think it would be sort of a way of sort of giving back to the neighborhood, because a 6-foot fence, if you're standing there, you're not going to be able to see the building. And I think it would be a shame, because it's a great building to see. And to sort of have little pockets, sort of windows that you can see through and see parts of the building, I think would be good for that street, instead of sort of a large, no matter how wonderfully landscaped. I guess they took off, the landscape people. So I would like to maybe see that more of. I'm struggling with it, but I understand where both sides are coming from, and it's sort of a struggle. But I think for what's going into that site, this is probably the minimal amount of impact that it will have in a new development for that site. So I think for what's going to become and what the future holds for that Flower Street, there's going to be a period of time in there where the neighborhood is going to have to adjust a little bit. And I would say, you know, Disney, reach out to the people and make it as comfortable as you can, because it is going to be uncomfortable between sort of the development of Flower and the development of the site. And hopefully that parking permit issue is something that can become real and for the neighborhood. But I think I'm okay with approving the project with the slight changes that we discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Yu. Mr. Ellis?
I'd like to thank the neighbors for coming out. I understand, having been on your side of the table on other projects, that it is tough to take time off from work and come down and express your opinions. Disney ultimately has appeared to be a good neighbor here. I understand that the construction phase, from demolition through construction, is going to be a tough time, and that's why I look to the representatives from Disney to open up, give you a place to contact, some way that you can get your opinion or your concerns expressed as quickly as possible. I'd like to look to the staff from the city, redevelopment especially. We are not parking and transportation. Traffic is not one of our issues that we have any control over. However, there are people in the city who can, and they can help you with those issues. The turn, that whole concept of making it work for you who live there. And so I would look to Disney and redevelopment and the city attorney's office, whoever is here from traffic and transportation, please jump in and solve this issue for these people now. I work near the Burbank campus of Disney, and I go by that daycare center twice a day, going and coming from work. And it took a long time for me to realize that there was a daycare center, because I've not seen a traffic issue. Actually, which you guys probably won't want me to say, that the traffic issue is the people pulling into the Disney campus. There is definitely a queue. But in that creative industry, I would tend to agree with them that they do start. I'm by at about 9, and there's a line. There's never a line at 7 or 8, and there's never a line at 10:30. They definitely come to work later. I think some of the suggestions that you had made were great, but you can't make them. You know, they don't fit in, like you said. It seems like a great project, and I'd certainly support it as it is. I do have a couple of concerns, which I've already mentioned before, but during that construction page, the notice of what and controls of what's going to happen, there was quite a long email from Ms. Hedge. Most of the issues of traffic and development are not under our purview here, our purview. The Flower Street design. The other question, and I know you guys are going to hate this, with 77 employees, even working across the site, you have somewhere around 30 parking spaces for employees, if it strikes me right. So that is going to be an issue. And people are basically lazy. Nobody's going to park 2 blocks away in a parking structure and walk over. And so I look to, again, to Disney. You got to figure out how you're going to deal with that. But, you know, people who work for Disney are great people, and maybe you can talk them into walking 2 blocks. Good luck. But with that, I'm ready to support the project. I think I could support the staff's suggestion. I don't know. I'm not a designer. I've listened. You had a great argument about a straight line and landscaping it. I would ask that you go back and, you know, maybe play around with that one. But, you know, that's, as you said, you're not going to fall on that sword.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Well, I agree with my colleagues. This is a well-designed project. I think we took a long time to go through everything, and we were able to peel a lot of the layers of this onion. And at the end of the day, it's very sensitive to its context. It's well-designed, well thought out, and the presentation was superb. I mean, the amount of material that the architect brought up was spectacular. We see a lot of projects up here, and they just don't have this level of presentation. I know you probably used a lot of it while you were presenting it to Disney, but nonetheless, while you go through this exercise of presenting to Disney and while you go through the exercise of exploring all these different views, one really gets to understand the different aspects of the building, the different elevations, and so therefore it's a better thought out building. And so you could tell that it's not just a visual, it's not a building that's trying to visualize something. It's true in its nature. It is a gold certified building, and so the design reflects that. And it's very, it's commendable. So thank you for taking the time to do that. As far as the landscaping was concerned, I mean, what a great presentation as well. The landscape architect, I know they left, but hopefully you guys could let them know that it was really well thought out, and they actually took pictures of all the different species and all the different plants and really explained how it was integrated into the design and how it would provide certain functions to the building that was required. So I appreciated that as well. As far as the overall layout of this building and the overall placement of this building and the general massing of the building, we're privy to the presentation in that there's a 65-foot sort of quote-unquote setback from the right-of-way from the street to its south. To its from this Truett Street. So therefore, this building has to be set away from Truett, and it has to be off of Flower, and that's really what it's done. And the building height limit in this area is 40 feet, or just over whatever the number was. It was somewhere around 40 feet, and this building is 23 feet or very close to that. So it's really taking up half the building mass that a building would take of this nature. It has great articulation. As I mentioned, the LEED Gold certification that it's aspiring to get, it's important to me because it's a daycare center. So children are there and they're learning about environmentally sensitive design and environmentally sensitive architecture, and they're at the same time are going through this space and they're enjoying it and learning from it, and also the parents are learning from it as well. And so that is important for I think the community overall. Even the playgrounds were well thought out. You could just tell a lot of energy has gone into designing this building. So I absolutely support this project, and I could also appreciate everything that's really gone into the community, and they've stepped forward and they have a lot of legitimate concerns about traffic and so forth. As an architect, I must say, though, this building is well designed. It's set back properly. It has the articulation, broken up the massing. It's done the best that it could do as far as parking and circulation is concerned. Some other uses could have ended up there that would have been a lot more impactful in the overall scheme of things. And so I appreciate the neighborhood coming out. We certainly do. You take the time to come over here. Everyone's busy. Everybody has a lot of things going on, and we appreciate you taking the time to come out here. It's not in our, we cannot stop this project from occurring. That's not what this board is all about. We're here to judge the design of this project, and that's what we're doing, is we're assessing the overall design, which entails the materials, which entails landscaping, which entails articulation, a movement of pedestrian and vehicles and so forth. So we cannot stop this development from occurring, and so we can't do that. But as far as what is proposed, as far as the design of it, I think it's well thought out, and so I absolutely could support this project. So if someone wants to make a motion and...
Sure. I'll move to recommend approval.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was...
Got to be fast.
Typically, what we've been trying to
That's right,
do
the
is
record,
have a record of decision, and you've previously asked us to read that into the record. So Jeff Hamilton has provided a summary in your report. If you don't mind, it's brief. I'll read it quickly. The project appears to be a high-quality design, innovative, interesting, and elegant. The green building techniques are fully integrated with the overall design concept and execution. The project presents a contemporary, attractive appearance. The site planning, especially in the areas of the children's courtyard, shows that a great deal of thought and consideration was given to providing the children with a high-quality environment to both learn and play. Is there anything that you'd like to change or add to that statement?
I have a comment. I know that this is design review, but it seems like one of the issues is not only the parking, but also the flow. I think what we should do is let them know that we're sensitive to that, and that, the signalization, stoppage, or something.
Well, you could, if I may, you could
Recommend
ask
it.
the applicant to consider working with our Traffic and Transportation Department to provide any recommendations, any mitigations that they would recommend.
I would say that that's good that we put that
I
as
was
part of the record.
going to put all that in my my approval here, but you guys all stomped on me. So are you done talking? Can we?
Go ahead.
I was actually going to approve a proposal with the conditions that staff has recommended, including the summary. But I thank you for reading it in. And I don't know if it's a condition. I would like to think to be a condition that the applicant works with the neighborhood and city staff, not just planning, that to solve the issues of traffic in that area.
I think that can be a consideration since that's not part of the purview.
Right, okay. So I'd like a consideration. Is there anything else that anybody?
This one I had, but I don't think it's going to be workable. When I look here at parking, including driveways, the site would have normally needed 70, but because of combining so on and so forth, the current project has 53 parking stalls. It does say here, though, and since there is still a surplus of parking spaces within the GC3 area, parking requirements has not been met. Anyway, there's excess parking. If that is true and you work it all out, I would love to have a reduction, and I know that's sort of like, are you kidding me, reduction of on-site parking, but consider, if it's feasible, a reduction of on-site parking to allow these corner nodes right here to be recessed with more landscaping. If you could lose one or two stalls, you push that corner back, you push that hard wall back, you push the transformer wall back, and if we had this, if you will, as a landscaping berm, and over there, I think it even makes more of an emotion towards its adjacencies to the residential. So anyway, it's just a thought, but no one loves to reduce on-site.
Would you like?
Is that a second to my motion?
I don't know.
It's actually a very good idea.
Yeah, so.
Would you like to add?
Oh.
You'd have to actually open up the...
Yeah, I don't know if we want to open up the condition, open up the hearing just yet. This is not a condition.
Not a condition. As a suggestion.
Welcome to add it as a consideration.
Consideration, that's the word we were looking for. That's big. My only other condition was that there is a line of communication between the neighbors and the applicant. I know that the applicant has made that statement, but either have it noted somehow either as a consideration or as a condition.
Have an active, continuous to completion,
Outreach.
a community outreach program that they know about, so that the good neighbor policy of Disney.
That would also be a consideration.
Consideration.
Rather than a condition.
All right, if I'd like to make it, that's my motion. If you got it, you're very good.
Then could we repeat some of these conditions?
No, absolutely not.
Staff would greatly appreciate that.
All right. Do you want to do that, Mr. Hamilton, or is this right for you to repeat?
I could repeat them back.
Okay.
What we heard is you'd like to move approval with the condition suggested by staff, that the applicant consider working with our Traffic and Transportation Department to provide any mitigations they would recommend. Also consider a modest or slight reduction in parking in order to be able to achieve condition number 1, which is articulate the exterior perimeter fence, as well as consider a continuous open line of communication with the neighborhood.
And for me, I'm super on board with what the architect said with this wall and establishing that alone. I think sometimes when you try to do this, it sometimes becomes a little too busy.
Okay, that's a little bit different than the condition that was...
What I wanted to say was, consider, if possible, work with a reduction of parking to increase the potential landscape in the corner of Truett and Paula and Truett and Davis, only in those corner nodules.
But, Mr. Insud, do we really want to start talking about a reduction of parking?
No,
because in itself, it's already short in parking, so perhaps it makes sense to keep the parking as is, and then the architect could get creative, and he's a very qualified architect, to try to integrate some sort of a berm to...
Why don't we say that? I completely agree. When you start, completely agree. To see what you can do in those corners, both architecturally and landscaping at those significant corners to help ease back that corner. That's it. And not parking.
Okay, so it would be, that consideration would be to consider increasing the landscaping at both the corner of Truett and Paula and Truett and Davis.
At the corners.
At those corners.
Actually, you're right. I'm not too crazy about the whole,
I'm not
moving
either.
of the fences or anything, but I would like to see more of detailed or a little more going on with the fence itself than just a 6-foot fence with ivy on it.
Because they could start working with the heights a little bit, articulation of the
Right,
heights.
well, he's got things going on inside of it where he's turning the sides of those things to give more visibility into the sides.
So how about if we modify the staff condition to suggest, because we're hearing a couple of different things. Board Member Ellis wanted to move the staff condition, and we're also hearing a consideration of greater transparency. So would you like us to include both considerations to work with staff to accomplish?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Sure, definitely.
Okay, good, thank you.
There's a motion?
Did you make the motion?
I believe I did.
I'll second.
Thank you.
I don't know if we were done or not.
No, that's okay. I didn't know either.
Pregnant pause. Roll call?
I'll be happy to do that, Eli. Board Member Ellis?
Yes.
Board Member Yu?
Yes.
Board Member Insua?
Yes.
Chairman Simonian?
Yes. Good. I'd like to suggest a quick 2-minute recess before we get on with the next project, so the architect could have and the applicant could have a chance to unload all the presentation drawings. Thank you.
Landscaping, I just kind of showed her briefly.
We're back.
Welcome back to Design Review Board 1. Our next case is 1-PDR-2007-064-B1346 Alameda Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the next case before you with the case number PDR 2007-064 located at 1346 Alameda Avenue was reviewed by the board on September 27, 2007, and the decision was written for redesign with 7 comments. This submittal is for final review. Project consists of 300 square foot addition to the first floor and a new 850 square foot second story with 8,218 square foot lot in R1 zone, floor area ratio District 1. The existing house is 1,304 square feet, 1-story single-family residence, and this house was built in 1936 in a modified Spanish style. The proposal extends the street front setback facade of the building closer to the street by 5 feet, resulting in 25 feet setback, which still is in compliance with the zoning code. The existing detached house garage at the back of the lot remains where it is. And the sheds at the rear of the site will be removed and will be replaced by landscaping. The second story step back from the first floor by 12 feet. This step back is additional 9 feet in relation to the previous submittal. The entrance feature with its own roof makes the entry point to the building readily identifiable. As you can see here, this is the proposal, and this was the last proposal. At the rear, the second story is set back an additional 5 feet by a total of 12 feet relative to the first floor. The existing single-story, single-family dwelling is Spanish in style and is going to be modified to Mediterranean revival. The street front wall has been made into 6 inches rather than the previous 4-inch stud to allow a deeper inset of the window. I'm going to go over the comments of the board and the response of the applicant. The first one is step the second story back on the street front elevation or make it look like a 1-story building. At the front, the second story is set back by 9 feet further from previous proposal. Create articulation on the north elevation. The ground floor roof at the front and the rear extend along the north elevation. You can see here. To create a continuous horizontal band. The second floor profile is narrower than previous submittal, reducing the overall project mass. As you can see here, the top floor are made a lot narrower and in scale. Consider relocating the rear balcony to the front or eliminating it and make the building step back at the rear on the top floor. At the rear, the second story is stepped back by 12 feet from the first floor. This creates a 5 feet deeper balcony than previous proposal. Choose higher quality material for windows and choose natural material. Also consider neighborhood details and materials. Provide sample of the foam stone used for window casing and surround. The applicant is proposing a stucco-covered foam window surround and underleaf molding. The proposed window frame are fiberglass rather than the previously submitted vinyl. Consider creating a more defined entrance porch. The entrance door is recessed by a further 3 feet, and the applicant is providing a more substantial entrance, as you can compare it from the previous one and the one proposed now. Amend neighborhood survey list. The neighborhood survey list has been amended, and it shows the setback relative to the street curb. The last comment is, make the chimney a more integral part of the building. The chimney has been made shorter since no flue is required for this gas-operated fireplace. It terminates at the first floor roof. Through consultation with staff, the applicant has proposed projection of the chimney to allow a termination point for the stone base, which wraps around the corner of the building on the front. This also allows further integration of this fireplace or chimney into the building as was requested by the board. Staff believe that this improvement has been made to the previous submittal as a result of proposed changes. The second floor setback has increased, more modulation is provided. Second story is more modest in scale. The windows are made simpler and are recessed in the front. While the orientation and layout of the design remains largely intact, the changes recommended by the board resulted in many improvements to the overall design. If the board chooses to approve the project, staff recommend the following. The foam molding should be modified to a higher quality material. If there are privacy concerns, a 42 inches high solid railing should be provided at the rear balcony to the sides on the north and south side, the side of this balcony. The following language could be used as a draft record of decision. The mass and scale of the building is appropriate for the site, and the building fits well within the neighborhood. As conditioned, the proposed materials and details are appropriate for the building and are of high quality. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any question.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for staff? No, thank you very much.
Actually, you know what, I do have one quick question. I wasn't here when it was reviewed the last time. Is there anything that indicates on the adjoining properties, I know there was an issue maybe with the balcony with privacy, and also I was looking at where the condenser units are going to be, that indicate the usages on those houses that are next door, or any, you know what I mean, how will that impact the houses on either side?
The houses on either side, there are photos we showed, I believe they are one story. Obviously, this will be taller, but whether privacy...
Well, you know what I'm saying is where,
Yes.
like, I know we have had other programs where the neighbors are there saying, hey, my bedroom window's right where they're looking to put their air conditioner.
Oh, I
Is there any
see.
chance that...
Yes, I'm afraid I don't have that.
6 feet from the property line anyway.
Yeah, I don't know, they're pretty tight, but...
That's what they told me.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The applicant and designer, Nareg Khodedadi, if you would please approach the podium, state your name for the record, and walk us through the project.
Good evening, board. My name is Nareg Khodedadi. I am the designer and the applicant on the project. Jale pretty much described it pretty well. The only thing is I did bring a sample, which last time we did not have, of the foam covered. It will be covered with either stucco or plaster. And that's going to go around the windows and under the eaves, the crown molding. The board has any more questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I've got a couple questions, really general questions of discussion, but with the applicant too. This project we're titling a remodel.
We are.
Remodel.
Right.
I don't see how you can, first, I got a bunch of questions, but I don't see how we can call it a remodel when you look at the foundation work and the shifting of the house that you're doing, and how, because you're really going to remove all the foundation of the existing house, correct?
Not all, no.
But, I mean, if not all, I don't see where you're not going to remove it, because I've highlighted all those areas of how the foundation, it won't work. And by the time you try to save that little section, and tie in with new foundations, deeper foundations, it's not going to happen. The house is shifted along the east side, setback. So that whole ability for that foundation to be as a structural, integral, circle, which is what you want in basic engineering, is lost and compromised. So you're just going to have little sections that you remove. Then those walls are also going to be shifted, so those bearing walls and those things are not going to work. At what point does a project not become a remodel addition and become a new construction, especially when you have such significant changes of the foundation system?
Well, it depends what is the extent of the construction and changes to existing.
Well, I just described it. With what I just described, you would call this a remodel and an addition? With what I just described to the structural system of the foundation, of the foundation, just that foundation alone.
Maybe I can help.
Looks at it as a percentage. So the question to ask is, what is the percentage of the building that's being repositioned, redesigned, worked?
If 50% of the existing is removed,
Well, I assure you normally 50% is going to be removed in this project.
Normally we talk about walls and roofs, not foundation.
But the foundation is what holds up the house. So if you
Board Member Insua, the calculations that we require of the applicant and that we do check are the 50% of the perimeter wall and roof. We understand your concern. It's a very valid concern. we'll take it back to our colleagues, but that is not how we've calculated the remodel portion.
So how much of this roof is being retained is the first question.
I
None.
guess the roof is completely taken away, right?
Right, so the roof is being completely taken away. And if you look at the foundation system of what's being removed, just a quick sketch of it, all those
Again, it's not the foundation, but it's the perimeter wall, and I think maybe Jaleh might have an answer for you.
They are removing one side of the front wall completely and the roof. And we will ask them, especially at plan check, to provide us calculation to show that not more than 50% is being removed.
Okay. I'm an architect and a general contractor. I know how buildings are built. And this is the first step of getting your project successful. The last thing I would want for you as the applicant to be approved on DRB and to go to the building department and go to those different departments to check calculations, how you're going to do it, and not be successful and have to start the whole process all over again. If I sound intense, it's because I've been through this process before, and it's the worst thing you want to do is to find out that you're not meeting those issues. So I'm doing it for you.
From zoning point of view, we look at the walls and the roofs. Building might have a different way of checking it, but we don't look at the foundation, how much is removed or being replaced.
Okay. Again, I'm doing it.
I think it was told to me that it was a planning 50% rule and not a building and safety.
In the plot.
So, no, but I agree with you. I don't see how they can get 50% out of this. And so, I guess we could go through it, but I concur with you.
You have a raised foundation house right now, correct?
Correct.
What kind of foundation are you going to introduce in your new construction?
As well, raised.
Raised foundation. Okay, it's unlikely because it's hard to marry an existing old raised foundation, removing close to 2/3 of it, and then to try to tie in a single-story foundation with support underneath it, because that single-story foundation will not support your two-story house. So you got to cut it, support a new foundation underneath that, and then to tie it all in with the new system, it's just not the way you could do it and would want to do it. I believe that the reason you're doing is because you may be getting information that this is a remodel, and down the road you're going to find out that it won't work as a remodel. All your roof is coming off because you're adding a second story, not piggybacking a second story, which is another issue. There's a lot of stuff here, even before we get into the design, that I would caution you.
It is a flat roof, so I don't know if you've seen the existing pictures.
But it's not.
No, we're not. We're gonna.
So it's gone, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just look at this. I mean,
it can't.
1/4 of your house, it's second quarter, that's half. Yeah. You're limiting this, that's more than half.
Absolutely.
Can I make
Let me make a suggestion, if I may, very quickly. Let's give the applicant a chance to present his project, and then once the applicant presents his project, we'll have an opportunity to dissect this issue and really dive into it, and whatever decision the board decides is appropriate at that point in time, we'll make. But let's at least give the applicant the courtesy to go through the project without interrupting him, because it's very hard to, present something when there's all this interaction. So please go ahead. You have a...
Mr. Simonian, can I just, it's important, mention that the whole point of looking at the construction as a remodel or new construction is that when it is a new construction, all the zoning code, current zoning code has to be applied and complied with. And this project does not have any problem. So regardless whether it is considered as a remodel or new construction, it's up to the code.
That was one of the questions
So
I was
that
going to
is
have.
irrelevant.
So if we're bringing it up right now, before you start, let's clarify it. So according to staff and the brief discussions that you've had and your brief preview with the project, is that whether it's considered a remodel or brand new construction, whatever is being proposed is within the codes and the guidelines and so forth.
Right, exactly.
So with that in mind, of course, if you go down the road and you have some problems, it's going to affect other aspects, which I'm sure you know of. So if you would present the project, and then we'll go through it. If you would maybe focus in on what are the changes that have occurred from the last time, some of the conversations you've had with staff and how they've influenced your decisions and designs and so forth. Go ahead.
Okay. like I said earlier, Jaleh pretty much described it very well as far as how we moved the second floor, behind the first floor wall, at least 11 to 12 feet, and then before it was only 2 foot 6 inches. Other than that, and then the entry where we kind of boxed it in. I don't know if you remember last time I was here, we went over that how an entrance, a separate entrance would have been much better instead of the previous design we had, which it was one straight line perimeter wall in the front and second floor as well. Other than that, as far as the windows, we did go with fiberglass windows. We went over it numerous times with Stephanie and Jaleh and of course the owner as well. We went from vinyl to fiberglass windows. That was one of the kind of major issues. Other than that, with the casing, I remember last time you guys talked about natural elements. We did go with the foam covered, stucco covered foam around the windows and the entry door as well. Other than that, no. See from the rendering, it's we did do a lot.
Thank you. Do we have questions for the applicant?
No, go.
Just a quick question. From the first floor to the second floor, how much is it coming in on the sides?
On the sides, around 2 feet or less than 2 feet, somewhere around there.
They look really small. So
on both sides, yeah.
2 feet?
With the eave is 1/6, so the wall being pushed back like 2 feet, or so overall around 2.5, close to 3 feet from the edge of the roof.
Distance here.
Yep.
Quarter inch.
I have a question while he's, Mr., you okay?
Yeah, go ahead, thanks.
Issue of the balcony, I know certainly, you have certainly made the second story addition smaller and articulated it a little better.
Right.
Was there any discussion with your applicant or your owner about the balcony, splitting it up, putting some in front and some in back?
Yeah, before we did talk about that, bringing the balconies up to the front.
Right.
But, they just have such a big yard in the back, they want to enjoy that, and they rather see their backyard rather than the street. So, and plus, we have a lot of trees around, the perimeter as well of the lot. So, it's pretty...
Do you know offhand, my question, which I was asking staff before, on the adjoining properties, where they, I mean, nothing's indicated, so I'm kind of wondering if you know where windows are or what uses in those houses?
Yeah, we actually did place the condensers, kind of where the next door will be their wall instead of the windows.
Right. Is there a wall between the property now? Or
halfway there is.
Halfway up?
Yeah.
So it doesn't come all the way out to your front setback?
No, it doesn't, no.
Right. And you're staying behind that with your condenser?
Condenser, right, we are.
You should check with code, because they made me put it 6 feet from my property line.
The condensers?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Just to...
If it is within the setback, it has to be completely enclosed. If it is outside the setback, it doesn't have to be on the interior side.
We did
closed, but it needs air to...
Well, there is an
I'm sure we'll have
opening.
vents. But we did, in the rendering, we did show it as covered.
Do you have any more questions?
Can you talk a little bit about, the room layout seems a little strange to me. I want to hear from you on why the dining room is like 400 square feet and then the living room is smaller, and then you have sort of an uncovered area that fit directly into being a dining room later. So.
The owner liked that layout. They have big family and they have big get-togethers, and they do want a covered porch, and then they do want that open area between the living and the dining, the family room. So.
Okay. Quick question, Jelly. The The covered area, does that get counted into the FAR or
It would be a lot coverage,
Lot coverage, not
not
FAR.
the FAR?
not
And what is the allowable
lot coverage.
the FAR on this one? Right now it's at 30%, right?
It's 30% is maximum because it's floor area ratio District 1.
So we're right at the
You're
maximum then, right?
Right.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, that's enough for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yolanda Lowry. Now it's time. Now we have the right project.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, and thank you for sitting around.
Second chances are nice. I'm still Yolanda Lacombe Lowry, and I'll be reading a statement for myself and one from my husband, who's here with me with laryngitis.
What's your address, I may ask?
1327
Thank you.
Spazier. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, part of the American dream is that everyone should be able to live in their dream home. However, the home should harmonize with the neighborhood. Our area, I live on Spazier. I'm one block away from and a few houses west of 1346. Our area is composed of small to medium-sized one-story homes built in the 1920s and 30s. Various styles for architecture represented here, but the styles are compatible with each other and with the size and period described above. Square footage of the various houses should be in a compatible range. In keeping with the historical precedent of the established homes, architecture should also be compatible. Houses should be compatible in scale of property, with some charm in architecture rather than simply a box. The proposed addition is for 2 stories. Though the lots in this neighborhood are deep, they are only about 55 feet wide. 2-story homes block the sunlight to their neighbors' houses, as well as the view of our beautiful Verdugo Mountains as seen from the 1-story houses. Many of us bought and kept houses because we love the sunshine and beauty. We all live in our backyards in California. A 2-story house towering over takes away a feeling of privacy. Another reason people build large houses is so more people can live there. More people equals more cars, and more cars and SUVs are creating problems with driving and walking alike. I have noticed that mostly vehicles from the expanded houses create the larger part of the problem. In closing, if the architect and the homeowner could go back and rethink their plans, they could present it to the board, something winning the approval of all concerned. That's my statement. Now I'll go to my husband's. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1972, I purchased my home at 1327 Spazier, where I still reside. My wife and I went through much deliberation and discussion to determine the type of house we wanted. Our decision was that we wanted to live in a R1 single-story home area. On a street with trees, moderately sized homes with architectural charm. The 1300 block of Spazier and the surrounding streets have met these requirements and more. It still does, but as the 2-story houses raise up, the prospect of continuing this as a charming neighborhood is becoming dim. In the last few years, there have been a number of expanded residences, and many with 2 stories. Understandably, people want large homes so they can have their families living under the same roof with them. It is also understandable that where there are more people, there are more cars. Herein lies one of the problems with expansion. One of the 2-story homes on my block can never seem to get all the cars off the street on street sweeper day, so the street sweeper never has a chance to properly sweep the street. One reason people give for wanting to have large additions and second stories is to have room for the children. Once again, that is an understandable reason. There are at least 3 2-story homes on this block who have given this reason to justify a large addition. All of these people have sold their homes and left with the children. The streets in this area are narrow. Parts of the 1300 block of Alameda have no sidewalks. That means that walkers have to get out into the street to get away to get around the cars. Enlarged houses will only create more problems. Many of these walkers are aging or disabled or both, and having to take a circuitous route to get around the cars is posing a safety risk. I am one of these people. I have residual damage from a stroke and have been ordered to walk by my doctor. Fortunately, unlike Alameda, we have sidewalks on Spasier, and so I don't have to dodge around parked cars. Additionally, Alameda is an artery used by people to get to North Glendale, the Verdugo, and Verdugo foothills. Having the street clogged with more cars owned by residents of expanded homes will create traffic problems and endanger children, elders, dog walkers, and others. There are other concerns, but in the interest of time, I am limiting my comments to the above. I am sending my heartfelt thanks to the members of the Design Review Board, also the members of the Northwest Glendale Homeowners Association for your tireless work. Very, very cordially yours, John M. Lowry. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for you. Do you reside directly behind this home?
No, it's about 3 or 4 doors west.
What, 3 or 4 doors west?
West, and on the
1 block over.
on the same block, but on the opposite. Alameda is here. Spasier is here. They're on the south side of Alameda. We're on the north side of Spasier.
Yes, I understand.
Okay.
And I see. So you're 1 block over 4 homes to the west.
Mm-hmm.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions for the speaker? Okay. Well, we have no more speaker cards. There are 2 forms of communication that have been presented to us via email. One is from Martik Tatagosian, and the other is from Philip Keller, and they both have been handed out and are part of the record.
Correct. And the one, the letter from Mr. Philip Keller is actually, Mr. Philip Keller is representing the Northwest Glendale Homeowners Association.
Who couldn't be here today.
Unfortunately, could not be here today. So he voiced his concerns regarding the project as the representative from the Northwest Glendale Homeowners Association.
Well, since we have no more speaker cards, we're going to close the public portion. Unless the architect or the designer would like a rebuttal based on some of the comments, but such little was said, so I'm not sure. Okay. Mr. Yu, do you want to start off this one?
Sure. I think I have a couple of points. The first one, I think one of the recommendations from the last board or the meeting, which I was not part of, but I think it talked about the balcony in the back. And I think that balcony is way too big. And it's also, it's articulated in a way that it has the sort of the guardrail as the main prominent piece of that. And so I think you can probably reduce it by just continuing the roof line up and reducing it by at least 50%, because it's almost like a huge deck out there where people hang out. The other part of it is I'm not too crazy about the fact that, or the idea of having that exterior covered space not counted in the FAR but still in the project, because what it does is it kind of circumvents a little bit of the FAR rule and therefore creates a mass that's bigger than what was intended to be in that area. And so I'm having a little problem with that. The third thing is just the replacement chimney that you created. I think it doesn't go along with the house. I think it just becomes almost like a little attachment to it. I would either have it just recess all the way back in and have it protrude out into the space. And it's a foot and a half coming in. You can, deal with that as, but I don't think that's a solution that I would support on that. But I think some of the other changes, the project has improved by setting it back from the front and as well as the back. But I'm still not too sure about massing of it is still pretty big for that lot. So I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question, and I didn't interject quick enough. I looked through the pictures here. I noticed, staff can answer this one. The garage, existing garage is a living space, and they're being required to take that out? Is that what's happening?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
All right. Having looked at the house, I went and looked at the site, and, the neighbors looking at your pictures. Am I correct also that the opposite side of the street is Burbank? The west side, or the opposite side, the odd side?
Yeah, they're saying yes.
Yes. It's the city of Burbank. So what's on that side of the street, even though it is part of the streetscape, is not under the purview of the city of Glendale or this design review board. So we'll never see any projects on that side. Thank God.
I was going to say, that one project.
But the houses are done right across.
We can't have cross-communication.
Oh, they are?
I'm confused then. Is it?
If it is in Burbank, yes.
Yeah, right. Because I was under the impression that the city line went down the middle of Alameda. No, it doesn't. Okay. The houses look like they should be in Burbank.
Having grown up in Burbank, that's what I always understood.
That's what I understood.
That center line at Glendale, because you can see the signage.
We'll check that as we
I'm just
talk.
kind of wondering, because I guess I'm going to jump right to the case. I wasn't here before, but I do have a problem with a breakout second-story home in the midst of a neighbors of all single-story homes. So just from that standpoint, I applaud the architect and the applicant for working with the community and trying to stuff the elephant into the bag, but it's still a pretty big, massive house.
This is a small map, but it shows that it is on the edge of the border.
Right, yeah, so it's hard to tell, though,
Yeah,
right?
sorry.
That's okay.
Too small.
They do it by a Google it. That being said, I don't think I can support it as it's currently designed. My other comments would be, I would agree on the deck. You're obviously right. Also, the last note is the materials, the foam. We've had other projects that, since I've been on this board, that we've said, no, thank you, we don't appreciate foam architectural pieces stuck on houses. And so if the applicant does end up and wants to use that type of thing, then you need to go to a stone or a pre-manufactured thing. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Mr. Insua.
Really nothing more to add. Everyone touched on those issues that I had. The only one I had before was, I don't think this could be built as a remodel, but other than that, nothing more to add.
Okay. Well, in assessing the design of the project and how it's evolved through the different reiterations of it, I believe that the house, as it's presented today, is greatly improved from where it was before. And so if we just look at the front facade and we compare the old entrance, which didn't really make much sense at all, and it was just this bulky building, has been broken up into building that has some articulation as far as two masses on either side with a more of an emphasized entrance. And so I believe that that's a positive redesign since the last reiteration. Furthermore, when we look at the site elevations, before, there basically was this massive wall with no articulation whatsoever, and I'm referring to the north elevation, and that's evolved quite a bit, and the wall's been stepped back about a foot, as Mr. Yu was able to measure, and there's been some other aspects of horizontal lines integrated as well. The windows have been upgraded from the last time around, I believe, if I heard correctly. So I think holistically, the house has been improved upon. And so I think everything over from here works. The issues, as I'm seeing, that are being raised, of course, are the balconies in the rear, which is really causing the most problems with this design, and I would emphasize on those as well. But I'm under the belief that at least the front has been greatly improved from what was there before. And so I do think that those balconies in the back could be improve the bond by quite a bit. In other words, you're trying to create this enclosed area that's on the first level, that's outdoor space, which is then causing you to go upstairs and have more of an elongated balcony as well. There were some comments that were made in the staff report that directly pertain to that, and that there was the railings that you propose at 3 feet, that could be 42 inches, and I believe Mr. Yu's comments of perhaps creating a mansard in the rear that basically continued the roof line from the first floor, came up in this area, would alleviate a lot of the massing. So if this roof kind of came up to here, and the balcony was really only this much, and perhaps even if this moved back, in which case this whole thing moved back, then proportionally we start alleviating some of these issues that are occurring in the back. And so I know some of the board is certainly leaning towards not supporting the project, but I just wanted to at least voice out that there's been a lot of improvements, and in fact the front, as far as a 2-story is concerned, is designed well, because this second floor, as you could see, is stepped way back. So it's steps back. So, but the back just needs a lot of work, I think.
One thing that I think that's missing is we haven't talked about context. You mentioned it a little bit. The context of this neighborhood is single story. That doesn't preclude adding a second story. In fact, go do a second story. But does the second story fabric work within the existing single story fabric? And what I see missing is that when we look at these homes, I could easily imagine each one of these homes having a second story attached to it, if it was an original design. Any one of these homes could have a second story and keep the single story, but you would see the single story band working. Imagine this house having a second story. They would retain that. The original design, I believe, would retain that, and then behind that introduce another house, so that the language of the single story is kept. And you see that in homes that successfully work in single story and second story developments. That's key. And when you look at these single story homes, each and every one of these things could have a second story. This one has a high pitch line, but you can see that there is this demising line that's established in single story. What I believe this design is failing is that is now a box, and the box has now been added these elements. So you got the box, and now you've added the element of the trimming, you've added the element of the box, and I don't think that that's working well with this neighborhood. In a different neighborhood that had that primary language, it would work. But I don't think it's working in this neighborhood, especially when you look at the pictures. And I think it would, for me, it would be giving inappropriate, for me, direction that this vertical house within the single-story neighborhood would ever work for me. It may work for others, but that's where I see the problem, and you can see it, for me, real clear when you look at the photographic survey.
Thank you for putting an architectural term to it. Now, it is.
Oh, and just to answer the question, actually both sides of Alameda are located within the boundaries of the city of Glendale.
Okay.
If you go up north past to Bellevue, which is north of Bel Air, then the west side of Alameda becomes the city of Burbank, and the east side is
So
the city
does
of
the
Glendale.
house with the 2 garage doors predate design review?
Doesn't look like it.
No, it doesn't either.
It would be impossible without the address. If you'd give us the address, we'd be more than happy to take a look at it.
I don't know, I'm just wondering.
Is it that one?
Yeah, that's the one.
1355.
Why don't we go ahead, and I will...
I don't know. I don't want to
We'll
make you
take a look
crazy
at
so
that and
late,
take-
but, all right.
So was this submitted under the new rules or the old rules of design review? It's old?
Yeah, because it's been here before.
But that's the thing I'm struggling with too, is because they came here, we gave them these things to work
That's
on,
a beat.
and they've come back, and, I mean, whether I think they achieved it, I mean, they did answer a lot of the questions that were posed to them before.
So it's under the old design, is that correct? Yeah.
Actually, it is under, the return for redesign was submitted on April 28.
So it's after, it's part of the new,
Yes.
so,
It is under the new rules.
Oh, really? It's not a grandfathered one?
In terms of the 15-day notice, which used to be 7 days, otherwise, I'm not sure.
I guess his question is our choice here, if it's under the new rules and we turn it down here,
Yeah.
then their next step is they don't have a chance to come back? Or,
no, they
If
could
it is
come back
returned
one more
for
time.
redesign.
If it's a new application, they could come back one more time.
Yeah.
but it has a B and it can't, how can it be a new application? That's what I don't know. I'll defer to staff to answer that question.
I think staff's working on answering.
There are a lot of questions.
Went away to try to answer that
I think
question.
Delia, keeping them busy.
You went to check the house with the double garage. You went to do
Oh, so she's doing something else.
I'm sorry, I got it off of it.
Okay, so, well, the comments that I was making is the thing is moving in the right direction at least. So, of course, what we could do is start discussing yet again, perhaps, some thoughts that are going to bring this design to fruition and for this project to work, for it to get approved by this board, what needs to occur. And in my opinion, it's the back has a lot of issues to it. The back, the massing and the bulk of the back. Mr. Insua certainly pointed out very good points about the front as well. And so perhaps we could, as staff is checking whether it was submitted under the new rules or the old rules, start formulating some thoughts and ideas of how to improve it, so staff could have some direction. So is it under the new
Yes,
rules or old?
to answer your question, it can come back another time for return for redesign.
And it was submitted, is it under the new rules or the old rules?
Well, it is under the old rules.
Old rules, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if it's under the old rules, the board can return it twice for redesign.
So this time, if we send it back, it'll be the second time then.
That's correct, yes.
So I would move to return for redesign with the applicant to reconsider the second-story addition in its design altogether. A condition would be that the foam moldings would be modified to a higher quality material, and that the deck in the back be reduced, and the issue of consider how their project affects the neighbors on either side. If that's probably one of those statements that you can concoct into a little better language, but I think if you see where I'm going.
Yeah, if I may, from Board Member Insua, we heard some concern of the front. From the other board members, we've really heard a concern about the size of the balcony in the rear. And if that's the direction that the board is giving, really focus on the size of the balcony in the rear and the appearance of the massing in the rear, that gives the applicant and staff some very focused guidance, because without that, it may be hard for us to understand how to direct the applicant as we work together.
Do you have an answer to that? Because I do. Okay, but go for it.
The statement that I wanted to say with respect to the front, my comment to this is to emphasize a horizontal single-story streetscape design within a two-story project, within a two-story design. That's what I would want. That's what I would try to convey, that if you look at the adjacent and the neighborhoods around there, they're a single-story design. And imagine taking any one of these homes and adding a second story to it. You still retain that horizontal single-story. At least I think I could do it.
So,
where this one goes vertical.
So we'd like to know if there's agreement on that point from the board, because that would essentially mean that the enhanced vertical entry that leads to a two-story staircase would essentially have to be removed as part of the design. And having worked with the applicant in a back-and-forth dialogue prior to this meeting, we have an understanding of the level of importance that is to the applicant, to the owner of the house. So if that's the direction from the majority of the board, we'd like to make that very clear, because it has been made clear to us that that's quite a priority from the owner, and that would break it out of that horizontal sensibility that I think Board Member Insua is asking for.
I can support that. I mean, I'm troubled with the mass of the second story, the massing of the second story. It's a box set in amongst a bunch of single-family homes.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way, that the second story addition to this neighborhood kind of troubles me, but I know that, we kind of are stepping in sort of between other people, and then it's gone through a process in which the second story was basically almost approved with the conditions that were set forth in the previous meeting. And so I think that direction was given to them, and it would be unfair to just kind of go 180 from that and say that, no, you can't put one in now because you happen to be caught between people. And so I would be okay with the second floor because of that. The things that are important to me are the porch in the back, reducing overall square footage to go below the 30%, without including that covered patio thing in the back.
Okay, so we're not hearing support for maintaining a horizontal line at the first story.
I'm okay with that part. That's something that we can add to it.
I am completely in support of a second-story addition to this. Completely support of doing a second story. I will never not say, don't do a second story. Completely. But for me, it needs to be worked better within the existing single-story language, and for me, this one doesn't do that.
See, I think what we're asking for direction on, in order to be able to work with the applicant in a productive way, if that horizontal sensibility at the ground floor, which would essentially reduce the height of that entry piece and prevent them from doing the grand staircase. If that's important to the entire board, then we will make that a condition.
Can they not reconsider that the staircase moves farther into the project? I mean, I'm not going to design the inside of the house.
Yeah, we would not recommend to condition the how.
Right, okay.
But if the what is to maintain the horizontal line, if you will, at the eave line at the ground floor, then we could express it as such. I'm clearly, I want to be clear about this with the owner here, that has implications for that particular aspect.
I have a few questions, and I'd like to ask them and address them, because I understand where staff is going and what staff is looking for. Last time this project was presented, who were the members of the Design Review Board and who was present?
They're listed here.
I believe there is, okay.
Eliano.
Mr. Aliano, Sinfrini, Simonian, Zorabian, Karapetian.
Okay. So, Mr. Aliano is not here, so I'm the only person that was here last time around that this project was presented. Right. So that was one item that I needed some clarification on. And number two, I just wondering, and you could just nod, the applicant or the designer, are you the owner of the home? They are. Okay. So you're not the owner of the house. Okay. No, not yet. And I understand Mr. Aliano's approach, and I'd like this board, including Mr. Aliano, let's all consider this briefly. I'm looking at the picture of this house at 1346 Alameda, and it is and it's a Spanish house. It's that typical one-story with tile roofs. Whether it's a mansard or an actual roof that goes through, whatever the case might be, with some thin columns on the left side, and with some sort of a bay window that pops out. And so what's being proposed, however, is more of a Mediterranean revival, and it's very different than the existing style of the home.
Right.
And so in order to add a second story to this existing Spanish style, one would need to certainly go down a Spanish route and would need to work with what's there, which is very different, and very different in direction as to what's being proposed. Now, the last time the applicant came, and I'd like to state this just in fairness. Now, the board does change, different people come in, and different board members have different viewpoints. And people that are in the process of the design review board sometimes get caught in the middle. So they get one direction from one board, they go away for a few months, and they come back, and all the members are different, and then they have a totally different approach. I distinctly, there's parts of this project that I do remember. I don't recall everything about it. And after reading the comments or the conditions that were placed the first time around, which was step the second story back on the street front elevation, and the applicant has done that. Create articulation on the north elevation, the designer has done that. We're not saying if it's done right or if it's done wrong, but they've certainly attempted to do that. Consider relocating the rear balcony to the front or eliminating and making the building step back at the rear. They have not done that. Choose higher quality materials for windows and choose natural materials. There's still some issues with that pertain to it. Correct.
Right.
Consider creating a more defined entrance porch. They certainly have done that.
They've done that.
Amend the neighborhood survey. I assume they have done that. And make the chimney more integral part of the building. They have done that. So the main points that were presented, they have done that. So what we need to consider is moving forward, is if we could, with some strong conditions, sending the applicant back to staff and having them work with staff, come back on this, or if the new direction of this board is so different than the old, and we need to basically wipe the slate clean and say, this style does not work, this concept doesn't work, it's almost like this is a preliminary thing for now, and we're just not comfortable with it, and go back. So I'd like, in order to answer your question, Ms. Reich, I think that's the bigger question is do we want to follow the lead that was created? Is that fair for the applicant, or are we just basically saying whatever it is? Mr. Insua, go ahead.
Thank you. Again, let me be quite clear. I am not saying retain the existing house. If the design palette, the design intent, this new approach is to completely demolish this house or do what you want, I am all for it. What is the net result? We're going to take, we don't want to work with the existing house, terrific. What do you got now? What I see now is not consistent with the existing neighborhood fabric that's there. I believe, and I'm sorry that we were not here before, whether we prove it or not, what I'm seeing is a house that in this neighborhood does not work with the existing single-story fabric. Not that you can't build a two-story, you can build a two-story, but I don't think this successfully does that by those items that I mentioned. One of the things I remember, and I'll paraphrase, is that the mandate of this board is to ensure the architectural consistency of the existing neighborhood. They use that word, ensure, and I would be uncomfortable and could not vote on this project, even with some reduction of the balcony, because I don't think it ensures the existing neighborhood fabric in that very important area.
Noted. But what I'm asking is do we want to have them, give them direction to amend this design, whether it's a little or a lot? It's probably more in the more than little category, and have them come back with some sort of reiteration of this, or are we basically wiping the slate clean and saying, do not go with Mediterranean, go with more of a Spanish, and trying to keep some of the aspects of the existing. So I agree with you, a lot needs to get done. Staff is asking for some clear direction as to which approach to take. And I think that and we don't all have to agree on it. It could be, whatever the case might be, but I think that's the important discussion to have, because there's going to be a couple of these that are going to come up that are going to be similar.
It would be preferable if at least 3 would agree on the direction.
Then we'd have a quorum or a decision of some sort. So I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Insua. I don't disagree with it. And my discussion is not as much in disagreements, but in clarification. That's all. So,
marching orders that I got when I was asked to join the board by the council member was I think just exactly what Mr. Insua had said, that, I apologize to the applicant. They were here last September. It's now July. That's, 8 months. Things change. I think I probably should reiterate that in this particular location, I have an issue with the second story, but I think you have come up with a solution, Mr. Insua, that could make it work. Right now, the project for my taste, is too massive. And if there's some way, is it wiping the slate clean? I don't know. Or are we giving direction that, you're going in the right way, you've improved as you've come back, keep squeezing it and see what can happen?
Well, that's what staff is asking us. Because,
Right.
Staff needs to work with the applicant, so there needs to be, a concise direction as far as which way for them to take it, for the designer as well. The designer needs to go work on this, needs to come back. So I think it is as simple as that. Is it a total redesign, new concept, new massing, new approach, whether if it's even correct to go two-story, or keep on doing what you're doing and shrink it more, get rid of that balcony on the first floor, get rid of the balcony on the second floor, I was instructed, bring it to the front and rework this thing. We're not saying it's even close, just rework it, but kind of keeping the mass. So that's the question I think that staff wants us to go in on. So perhaps we could focus on our discussion there and be a little more specific. It's already 8:30 in the evening.
Yes. I was at bar.
We had two projects.
I know. 3.5 hours later.
Yeah, I think next time we'll make sure that we have a longer list of projects so that we have a more concise discussion. No, I'm kidding.
We have a full agenda next time.
So, if I may reiterate what we've heard, and then perhaps that would speed things along. So what we're hearing is not only that the deck in the rear is too large and the overall mass is too large, but that overall the house appears incompatible with the single-story neighborhood, and that perhaps if the second story was stepped back from the first story sufficiently in the front and on the sides, and the roof at the rear helped to conceal the balcony within it, then the massing may be more compatible with the single-story neighborhood.
Often I hear people say step back. It has absolutely nothing to do with stepping back. Look at the drawing, look at the photographs of what we have here. You can step back to Sunland and it's not going to achieve what's there. This house, whether you go to the front or go to the back, clearly has a vertical emphasis. Is that correct? Has a vertical emphasis. So, do these homes that we have here have a vertical emphasis? No, their blocking is a blocking that occurs horizontally. So, to take a vertical emphasis and push it backward or forward, it doesn't matter, it's still vertical. The blocking of this house needs to be horizontal. And here's an example of horizontal blocking. So when it reads single story with a double story or all that. It's the blocking. So the words that you can use, and I apologize, but I want you guys to be successful. Emphasize a horizontal blocking in a two-story house, and they do it.
So maybe the way, I think what Ms. Reich is trying to do is push us along by coming up with some verbiage and then trying to spur some conversation. And I think
here's the verbiage. Emphasize the horizontal blocking of a two-story house. That's it. And then utilize the photographs to achieve that. For me, it's as simple as that.
Is this the previous proposal is more horizontal? Is that what you're...
No, what Mr. Insua is referring to, and let me clear this up. And we have pictures here which staff doesn't have quite in front of them. Is Mr. Insua is saying that if he would only support a two-story building, or he thinks a two-story building is appropriate at this site, if the first floor maintains its horizontality and there's no vertical element of an entrance, and it's a pure horizontal piece as are the rest of the homes in the area, and then the second story is stepped back from that first story and has its own roof line as well, and there's no vertical pieces such as the vertical piece on the right, vertical piece on the left, and the middle vertical piece. So what we have here, the concept here, is more of a Mediterranean Tuscan style kind of a rectangle which lends itself to more vertical, as opposed to more of the one-story contemporary ranches in Spanish, which are more horizontal. So that's the question that we have in front of us, as we're dissecting it, is exactly that. So I can't describe it any better than that.
I'll make a motion that the project be sent for redesign, and staff is instructed to have the applicant consider horizontal block. If you can say your words again.
Okay, I think we understand, and we were actually using the term step back in order to, and I'm glad that Board Member Insua clarified the horizontal massing. We understood the step back to be the same thing, so I'm glad that we're clear. The only other question that we have is that reading of horizontality important on all four sides, including the sides of the house, or is the priority of the horizontal reading and the step back that might result from such a horizontal reading, is the priority of that primarily in the front of the house? So that's the other question we'd like to...
I would add that it is important on the front of the house, but the articulation on the sides needs to be maintained or improved upon. I don't just do that.
Currently, they have 12 inches, as they've said, of differentiation between the second-story plane and the ground-story plane. I guess the question to you is the sensibility of the board, is that sufficient, or is the board requesting a more significant differentiation between the ground floor and the second floor on the sides of the house as well?
I think it needs to be more. What it's not much. It almost looked like an accident on the wall, kind of just jogging in a little bit, so. Yeah, until you look for it.
Yeah, right. I would agree with Board Member Yu. So I've made a motion, which I'd like to take your words and put it into my motion, but do you want to read it?
So I think what we have is that the massing of the home, the board supports the second story on the home as long as the second story is compatible with the one-story neighborhood. In order to achieve that, emphasis should be placed on the horizontal nature of the design, with potential requirement for a step back of the second story at the front to achieve that horizontal massing, and an increased step back at the sides as well, to diminish the size of the rear balcony by potentially increasing and enhancing the roof so that the design of that balcony is better integrated into the overall design.
Well said.
Well said.
Excellent. I'd like to just provide some clarity or advice to the applicant on this subject, because a lot was discussed here. In order to accomplish everything that staff just reiterated and everything that was discussed, one really needs to adapt to and adhere to the styles of that street, which is some of the existing Spanish colonial, some of the federal styles that might be there, some of the ranch. All those tend to create more of a horizontal feel to it than the style that you're proposing. So as long as you try to go down that route, you're going to have a hard time accomplishing all these requirements that were just set in front of you. So be mindful of that and really consider those as some advice to try to get you through this process a little quicker on the next time around. So I think a motion was made, conditions were reiterated. Do we, Ms. Reich, need to go over the comments again?
You mean the record of decision?
Yes.
The conditions in this case will act as the record of decision.
Very good. Okay. So with that said, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Very good.
Okay, the motion was written for redesign by Mr. Ellis, and Mr. Insua seconded. This is the roll call.
Excuse me. The other comments that the that you're including also that staff had, the foam molding to be modified, those are included in this, in addition to the statement that you just made?
Yes, so we will also include, just so that we're clear, we'll also include, improve the finishes, including the foam molding, to find a precast or other acceptable detail that is not the foam. I think the windows have already been improved, so we will review all the other conditions and make sure that the appropriate ones are added.
Great, thank you.
Okay, this is the roll call. Board Member Ellis?
Yes.
Board Member Yu?
Yes.
Board Member Insua?
Yes.
Chairman Simonian?
Yes.
Motion passes by 4-0. Thank you.
Well, since we have no more items as far as hearing items are concerned, I think we need to move on to the approval of minutes,
Actually,
which we already moved up.
We did that.
Exactly.
We've done
We already
that.
continued to August the 7th.
Good, and then as far as oral communications is concerned, no one's sitting in the audience. Is there any staff business or discussion items?
We would just like to remind the board members that there is an alternative assessment panel scheduled for August the 7th in 2 weeks, and we have one item on that agenda, which would be case number it would be the case located at 1749 Allen Avenue. So we will be seeing 3 of you at that alternative assessment panel.
And do you know offhand on the regular meeting agenda, how many projects we might be looking at?
On the regular agenda for that evening, starting at 5 o'clock, we have 4 items on the agenda, one of which was continued from today's.
And if I could request that the project that was continued from today be placed toward the end of the agenda? The one on Highland?
The one on Highland?
Could I?
Yeah, like at the end would be excellent.
Could I make a comment on that?
Yes, sir.
Because some of us, there's going to be 3 of us on that assessment panel, which means that we need to be here at 3.
Correct.
And then we just added another hearing as well to that because of the continuation from today.
We will, in fact, feed you.
Come again?
We will provide food for you. FYI.
Well, what I'm wondering is if it makes some sense, because the applicant willingly, pushed it back, if we could maybe move it to a further date, in which case we're not creating such a logjam and, on that day.
At this point in time, because we've already announced it
Well, we could still,
earlier today,
hearing is
Still in meeting,
we're still in meeting.
Well, in addition, there may be fewer items on that agenda as well, because I think we have,
actually have.
just a moment, let us.
That's going to be a long day.
It's going to be a long day. And I'm being...
Why don't we see if all the cases that are currently scheduled are really going to go forward before we worry about continuing the case?
That's just a long day to go from 3
Yeah,
o'clock to 8 or 9 o'clock.
although unfortunately, that is kind of the result of, it's what happens when we move meetings to the evenings.
I know.
Evenings become
But
longer.
we do have a power over this one.
Here's
Because we could decide
Yeah,
when
but it may not be necessary at this point. There may be other,
point well taken.
let's decide at the time when we see.
According to Stephanie, one of the items will actually be continued, and so we might only have 3 items on that evening's agenda.
Very good.
My request still stands. Thank you.
As so noted.
So noted. Thank you.
Very good.
I move we adjourn.
Right?
What about the alternative assessment panel minutes?
Uh-huh.
How do we do those?
How about on the 7th?
On the 7th, that might be a good idea, so, with a motion to adjourn, and it is close to 8:40, so, that said, have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.